Hey guys, tonight we slip behind the heavy oaken doors of a medieval castle, breathing in the mingled scent of old stone, candle wax, and a trace of something sweeter that might be roasting apples. Or maybe just the heady perfume of intrigue that clings to every velvet curtain. It's dark outside, torches flicker along the walls, and you can almost hear your own heart thumping against the hush. You're not supposed to be here. Not at this hour, not with shoes this muddy, and definitely not with curiosity this strong. But here you are, padding silently down the long corridor, past portraits of lords who are long gone, through cold draughts and the soft scurry of mice in the wainscot. What's behind these closed doors? Tonight you're about to find out, though, fair warning, you probably won't survive this in the strictest knights and dragons sense. Consider this your only chance to disappear into the night and slip into places meant for other people's eyes. So before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 AM? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey. Together, here on Timeless Sleep. You begin with the click of a latch, a heavy wooden door that groans just enough to announce you. The castle is silent except for distant footsteps, maybe a guard, maybe a house servant doing their rounds, but you're already somewhere between excitement and guilt, your breath fogging in the cool air. The stones beneath your feet are uneven, worn smooth by centuries of boots, slippers, and occasionally bare feet. Tonight, the only thing you're covering is your own curiosity, as you press deeper into the heart of the castle, where the halls narrow and the wall hangings grow thicker. Tapestries with faded hunting scenes mute the sounds of your steps, and you become acutely aware of every movement. The world outside fades, the villagers, the fields, the restless wind. In here, the velvet night is stitched with secrets. You pass a small wooden stool, left outside a chamber by someone in a hurry. On it, a single copper goblet, still beading with wine. You peer inside, half expecting to find a lipstick mark, but the rim is bare, save for a trace of honey. Castles, you realise, are full of these abandoned tokens. A dropped handkerchief here, a hairpin glinting by a window ledge, a note hastily tucked behind a jug. You're gathering a private archaeology, one piece at a time. Not all tokens are so innocent. In the flickering torchlight you spot a ring embedded in the stone, part of a hidden door mechanism, or so you imagine. In truth, medieval castles were riddled with such mysteries. Spiral staircases designed for defence, false walls, secret passages meant for a quick escape or a private visit. There's a hum just under the silence, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. You pause outside a chamber where light spills out from beneath the door. Voices, low and musical, rise and fall. Too soft for command, too intimate for politics. You consider pressing your ear to the wood, but something holds you back. Instead, you drift onward, letting the night draw you like a tide deeper into the labyrinth. It's odd how quickly you adjust to the dark, how you learn to move quietly, softening your tread with each step. Along the corridor you spot a pair of embroidered slippers, so tiny and delicate you wonder if they were meant for a child, or for a lady slipping out unseen. One is turned askew, as if left in a hurry. Did she forget it, or was she running? You feel a prickle of delight at the thought. A forbidden meeting, a half-glimpsed smile, the hurried scrabble of shoes on cold stone. You slip through a velvet curtain, heavy enough to muffle the world behind you. Suddenly everything is softer. The firelight, the air, the conversation at the edge of hearing. This is no grand hall. Here, the ceiling is lower, the walls hung with thick brocade. You catch a waft of something warm and spiced. Cloves, maybe, or cinnamon sticks pressed into oranges, a trick borrowed from Moorish traders and now the latest thing at court. Mainstream fact, these imported spices were wildly expensive. flaunted by the wealthy as a symbol of status, but tonight they're simply another layer of comfort and desire, scenting the very air you breathe. A small dog barks from beneath a table, startling you. Its eyes glint in the firelight, unimpressed, unthreatened. Pets were cherished in castles, sometimes more than people. The lapdog yips, then sniffs and curls up again, satisfied that you're just another shadow. You make a mental note. Avoid the big dogs, make friends with the small ones, and always carry a treat. Another odd bit of castle wisdom. You edge around a chaise where a lady dozes, one gloved hand draped to the floor. Her mask, a delicate half face of painted leather, dangles from her wrist. Even in sleep, the castle demands a certain elegance. Silks, ribbons, jewels nestled in hair. You marvel at the softness of her skin, the faint scent of violets clinging to her pulse. Historians still argue whether these perfumes were strong enough to mask less romantic odours, or if the fashion was mostly wishful thinking. A door creaks open. Instinctively, you flatten yourself behind a tapestry, feeling its rough weave scratch against your cheek. A pair of voices drift past, laughter, hushed and breathless. You risk a peek. Two figures, both men, both richly dressed, one carrying a lute. Their boots are muddied, their cheeks are flushed. They disappear down a side stair, lost in their own adventure. You wonder if music will join them, or if tonight's forbidden pleasure is simply the thrill of being somewhere you shouldn't. You press on, passing a window cracked open to the night. The air is bracing, tinged with wood smoke and the distant cries of the watchman. Down in the courtyard, a servant scurries between shadows, clutching a basket of linens. You wonder how many eyes are truly watching, and how many are pretending not to see. In a castle, secrets are a currency, traded carefully but never entirely free. Your stomach rumbles. Castles may be full of feasts, but late at night hunger is a more private affair. You recall a story you once heard. A nobleman who snuck to the kitchens for roast pears after midnight, only to be caught by his own cook. The penalty? An extra pear, and a promise not to tell. It's the small rebellions that taste sweetest. Tonight, you wonder what flavour your rebellion will take. You find yourself at a crossroads. One passage leads toward the kitchens, the other deeper into the Lord's private chambers. You hesitate, listening for movement. Somewhere, a clock chimes the hour, time moving in its slow measured dance. You choose the private chambers, heart fluttering with anticipation. The hall narrows, ceilings dropping, the air growing richer. Here, tapestries depict not hunts or battles, but scenes of love and myth. Venus rising from the sea, swans twining their necks, lovers entwined beneath blooming apple trees. The images are lush, sensual, and ever so slightly scandalous. You remember learning that such images were meant both to instruct and to delight, reminders of classical virtue disguised as invitations to pleasure. A soft rustle from a nearby alcove catches your attention. You draw closer, discovering a low table set for two, wine decanter, 2 goblets, a plate of sugared plums. No one is here now, but the warmth in the room suggests recent company. You picture 2 hands reaching across the table, fingertips brushing, a quiet moment stolen from the world. These are the pleasures no historian can ever truly capture. The way desire transforms a single sip of wine into a promise. You move on, trailing your fingers along the carved balustrade of a private staircase. The wood is smooth, burnished by generations of careful hands. You climb, half expecting the stair to give way to some secret room, a turret where lovers meet or lords confide. Instead, you find yourself in a gallery lined with portraits, faces that watch with painted eyes, some stern, some laughing, some with secrets you'll never know. For a moment you feel the weight of history press in. These stones, these lives, these nights. You wander past a table scattered with chess pieces, a game abandoned mid-play. The Black Queen stands alone, ringed by pawns. You smile. Someone left in a hurry, distracted by something far more interesting than strategy. In castles, Even games have their secrets. You linger near a window watching the moon rise over the distant fields. A figure moves below, cloaked and swift, slipping between shadows. You wonder who they are. Servant, lord, lover, spy, maybe all at once. In a place like this, no one is only what they seem. Your feet ache, your senses swim with candlelight and possibility. The castle is a labyrinth, each door opening onto another story, another secret. Tonight, you're both guest and ghost, witness to pleasures meant to be hidden, delights tucked behind velvet nights and locked gates. You pause to listen. Somewhere laughter rings out, soft, delighted, unashamed. It echoes down the corridor, reminding you that pleasure, even in the most guarded places, is never entirely forbidden. It simply waits for someone brave, or foolish, enough to seek it out. And so you move forward, a little bolder, a little more at home among the castle's secrets. Velvet nights, locked gates. Behind them, the world is softer, stranger, and more beautiful than you imagined. The story is only beginning. You slip out of the velvet-shadowed corridor and step into the hush of dawn-tinged air. Just beyond the warmth of torchlight, the castle's heart beats softer. You find yourself guided by the faintest trace of rose and something greener, fresh, not perfumed, almost sharp as crushed leaves. A hidden garden, walled and private, stretches before you, framed by archways of yew and an iron gate latticed with dew. No sentry stands here, only the memory of 100 tiptoed footsteps, all quietly craving a moment away from the cold stone. You push through a narrow gate. The iron is cool against your palm and gives a tiny squeal, a sound instantly swallowed by greenery. You're in the ladies' garden now, not a public courtyard, nor the stately parterre for royal processions, but a tucked-away pleasure plot. Here, moonflowers curl against midnight blue walls and violets spill between flagstones. Roses grow wild, unchecked by the neat order of the king's gardeners. You brush past a bush and catch a thorn on your sleeve. It tugs, then releases. As in life, even beauty here has a hidden edge. You wonder who keeps this garden. Someone trims back the thistles, you see, but not enough to curb the chaos. This is a space for secrets, for giggling, for hands entwined under cloaks. No one's writing songs about the king's turnip beds or the kitchen's herb patch. But these gardens, the ones behind hidden doors and half-forgotten arches, these are the ones that grow stories. You step deeper, feet pressing damp earth. In the early light, two women sit by a stone bench, heads bent close, their laughter rippling out among the honeysuckle. One wears a dress of moss-green velvet, the other a simple linen smock, maybe a noble's daughter and her companion, or perhaps just friends who've snuck out before breakfast. Their conversation stops as you approach, but not out of fear. Instead, they size you up, one eyebrow arched, one mouth pursed in a half-smile. You're an interloper here, but curiosity is its own kind of passport. A silk kerchief lies forgotten on the bench, embroidered with a single gold initial. You're tempted to pick it up, to run the fine thread between your fingers, but you know better. In this garden, every dropped handkerchief is a message, and you have not been invited to read. The ladies resume their laughter, low and bubbling. The green-dressed woman leans in and whispers a name, prompting the other to clap a hand over her mouth in mock outrage. There are always names that must never be spoken in sunlight, always rumours that flower best where the wind can't carry them away. Maybe they're talking of a knight too bold at the last feast, or a maidservant caught with a poem pressed to her breast. You'll never know for sure, but you do know that the best stories start with laughter shared before anyone else is awake. You meander along a flagstone path, trailing your fingers over lavender and sage. Your fingertips come away sticky with scent, a kind of invisible ink, reminding you of where you've been. Lavender, you recall, was prized for warding off moths and evil spirits. Some believed it brought luck in love, others that it would make you dream of the person you most desired. You breathe deeply, and the garden seems to pulse with possibility. The sun lifts, touching gold to the tops of the walls. For a moment, the garden is a jewelled room, more private than any boudoir. This is where noble women come to unlace their collars and their worries, where they swap confessions beneath a pear tree or sit in silence, lost in their own hopes. The castle might belong to the lord, but the garden, this patch of green rebellion, belongs to the women. You catch a glimpse of a figure in blue, picking violets near a shaded arbour. She moves quickly, gathering them into a posy. It's not for beauty, you realise, but for a tincture. These violets, when steeped in wine, are said to ease headaches and calm the heart. A folk remedy, passed down from mother to daughter, rarely spoken of in the main hall where physicians in stiff robes prefer leeches and Latin. Some noblewomen even believed that tucking violets under their pillows would ensure their husband's faithfulness, a notion that historians still find more hopeful than effective. You pause by a marble basin where a goldfish flickers beneath floating petals. A pair of sparrows dart down, bold as thieves, and you watch their tiny battles for the choicest crumbs. Not everything in the garden is human drama. The sparrows, the bees, even the ants marching up a rose stem. Every creature here seems intent on its own tiny pleasure. A sudden peal of laughter pulls your gaze. Farther down the path, a group of women, noble daughters and a few older matrons, gather in a loose semicircle, passing around a battered book with hand-painted pages. You edge closer, trying to look uninterested. The book is open to a poem, lines illuminated with curling vines and mythic beasts. One woman reads aloud, her voice bright and teasing, as the others gasp or snicker in turn. You recognise the cadence, Ovid, or maybe something even more daring. These are not tales recited in church. These are stories of gods seducing mortals, of lovers outwitting fate. The kind of stories the castle chaplain warns against, and yet somehow they survive, retold in the garden sanctuary. A lady with silver-threaded hair passes you a smile, eyes twinkling above her fan. "Do you read Latin?" she asks, her voice a blend of challenge and invitation. You shake your head, perhaps truthfully, perhaps not. She laughs. No matter. Sometimes the best things are understood without words. She snaps the book shut and tucks it away, leaving you with the faintest sense that you've missed the punchline but gained a secret instead. You linger by a bower draped in morning glories. A young girl sits perched on a low wall, weaving flowers into a crown. Her hands are deft, her focus intent. As she works, she hums a melody, an old song you half remember from childhood tales. Something about a lady fair and a knight so bold, though it's possible she's changed the ending to suit her own mood. In the Middle Ages, you recall, gardens were as much places of performance as the grandest hall. Here, music and laughter grew wild, less staged, less polite. The girl looks up and offers you the crown, a peace offering from one outsider to another. You accept, placing it on your head. The flowers are cool and damp, the petals trembling slightly as you move. For a moment you're crowned queen of this green, fragrant world. You wonder how many others have worn such crowns, how many have claimed a kingdom of dew and roses before the day really begins. In the far corner of the garden, a high hedge screens a small stone bench. Two figures sit close, their conversation just out of reach. You catch snippets, a joke, a low promise, the kind of talk that makes cheeks flush and eyes shine. No one will mention it at breakfast, but by supper someone will have noticed, and the garden will have grown one more story to be whispered behind fans. You make your way to a wooden gate at the back of the garden, half concealed by climbing ivy. The hinges are old, the wood weathered, but the latch is polished bright. Someone comes here often. You slip through and find yourself in a tiny orchard. Pear and apple trees trained into elaborate arches, fruit still ripening in the pale light. The orchard is quieter, more secret still. Here, women who tire of the garden's chatter can sit in solitude or meet a friend or simply breathe. You recall a popular tale, a lady and her maid locked in an orchard, debating love while picking fruit. Did it ever happen, or was it just a story told to liven up a dull embroidery hour? Historians still debate whether these orchard trysts were common or wishful thinking. Perhaps, as with all good stories, the truth is somewhere in the muddled middle. You pick a pear, turning it over in your hands. Its skin is imperfect, spotted and rough, nothing like the polished fruit on the Lord's table. You take a bite anyway. The flesh is sweet with just a hint of sour, the juice running down your chin. You wipe it away on your sleeve, uncaring of stains. In this walled orchard, etiquette is softer, rules are more suggestion than law. Birdsong fills the air. A magpie hops along the wall, its feathers flashing blue in the sun. Superstition. A single magpie means sorrow, two mean joy. You look for its mate and, finding none, decide to rewrite the omen for yourself. The day feels too alive for sorrow. You wander back into the garden proper, feeling the gentle warmth of the sun rising higher. Women begin to drift away, one by one, heading for morning prayers or the business of the day. Before they go, a few pause to exchange quick glances, small nods, sometimes a squeeze of the hand. Here, you see, friendships are forged in shared secrets. One stolen flower, one whispered name, one promise not to tell. You think about the men, the lords and knights who stride through the great hall, chests puffed and boots loud. They have their tournaments, their councils, their wars. But here, behind a wall of climbing roses, the real power of the castle is being quietly cultivated. Bonds are made, rivalries are played out in gestures and glances, alliances shift like the shadows cast by a passing cloud. A group of maids begins to sweep the paths, gathering fallen petals and scattering fresh herbs. Their chatter is light, but their eyes are sharp. One girl pauses to pluck a thorn from your sleeve, a small, almost motherly gesture, and then she is gone, her laughter trailing behind. The servants know more than anyone what happens in the gardens. They are the silent witnesses, the record keepers of every tryst and quarrel. As you watch, a young nobleman appears at the gate, hesitant, cheeks pink with embarrassment or anticipation. He bows clumsily to the women, who respond with varying degrees of amusement and politeness. The bravest among them tosses him a flower, which he fumbles before tucking it behind his ear. You're not sure if this is the start of a love story or a practical joke, but it hardly matters, for now everyone is smiling. A bell rings from the chapel tower, calling the castle to prayer. The spell breaks, laughter dissolves, and the garden empties. You're left alone with the fading scent of roses, the memory of shared jokes, and the sense that you've seen something both ordinary and magical. You take one last slow turn through the garden, tracing your path among the herbs and flowers. There's a comfort here, a sense of continuity, generation after generation tending the same soil, whispering the same secrets, spinning the same hopes out of sunlight and shadow. Maybe that's why these hidden gardens endure, while grand halls crumble and feasts are forgotten. You linger by the gate, reluctant to step back into the world of stone and duty. You know you'll return, if not tonight, then some night soon. The garden will wait for you, as it always has, holding its pleasures just out of sight, just beyond the reach of prying eyes and heavy boots. And as you slip quietly back through the gate, leaving the wild roses and winding paths behind, you carry with you the faintest sense of rebellion, the sweet ache of something forbidden and beautiful, nourished in secret just behind castle walls. You step away from the fading laughter and tangled vines of the garden, your hands still scented faintly with lavender and crushed rosemary. The air grows cooler as you move through another archway, brushing the dew from your sleeves. The stone beneath your feet is slick, echoing with each step, a gentle reminder that you're back in the castle's warren of private spaces, winding toward the next hidden pleasure. The sound of splashing water and the faint chorus of giggles beckon you, drawing you down a narrow mosaic-tiled corridor you hadn't noticed before. This is the bathhouse, or rather, the noble women's private bathhouse, a chamber set apart from the noisy communal washing spaces of servants and squires. Here, water is luxury, drawn from a deep well or piped in through ingenious centuries-old plumbing, warmed by fires in the basement kitchens. The doorway is draped in heavy linen, slightly damp from steam. You push through, and the world softens instantly. Mist clings to the air, silvery and thick, diffusing the lamplight into something dreamy and otherworldly. The central bath is a shallow stone pool, its surface rippling gold in the glow of floating candles. All around, low benches are piled with towels, ewers of rosewater, and bowls of sliced lemon for softening calluses, or perhaps just for show. The smell is sweet and sharp, a blend of beeswax, rosemary, and the faint trace of olive oil used to polish the flagstones. You linger in the shadow of the doorway, at first uncertain where to look. Women move unhurriedly through the haze, wrapped in linen shifts or, in a few bold cases, nothing at all. Conversation floats just above the water, carried in soft voices and laughter that rises and falls like birdsong. There are no stern chaperones here, no fathers or husbands with rules and timetables, just women, alone and together, at ease in a world carved out for their own comfort. One woman, her cheeks flushed, her hair pinned high with silver combs, glances up and catches your eye. "Don't just hover," she calls, voice teasing and warm. There's room in the steam for one more ghost. You slip inside, your presence acknowledged but not interrogated, and settle onto a bench, letting the humid air seep into your bones. The bathhouse is not only a sanctuary from the cold and clamour of the great hall, it is a theatre of relaxation and ritual, where etiquette softens and the rigid lines between rank and age blur in the fog. Here, a dowager countess shares soap with her youngest niece, and a chatelaine might let her mask slip just long enough to swap scandalous stories with the stablemaster's daughter. A bowl of floating rose petals is passed around, each woman plucking a petal and pressing it to her lips or eyelids before letting it fall into the water, a tradition borrowed from some forgotten poet, or maybe just invented on a slow afternoon. Historians still argue whether such rituals were born of pagan origins, or simply the desire to add a little magic to daily chores. A woman sitting beside you leans in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you hear about Lady Maud's midnight visitor? My cousin swears she saw a shadow slip into her chamber. Too tall for a maid, too quiet for her husband." The others lean closer, faces bright with expectation. You're swept into the current of speculation, your mind spinning webs of intrigue. No one mentions names above a whisper, that's not the point. In the bathhouse, rumour is an art form, one that floats as lightly as steam. A serving girl appears with a tray of honey cakes and warm cider, moving silently among the bathers. You take a cup, cradling its warmth. The cake is small and impossibly rich, scented with saffron and clove, the kind of luxury most villagers would never taste. You remember reading somewhere that medieval castles imported honey from as far away as Spain, and saffron was more valuable than gold. Here, you simply savour the taste, rolling it on your tongue, grateful for this moment out of time. Laughter ripples across the water. Two younger women race to braid each other's hair, hands slipping and tangling, the contest ending in a gentle splash. Another sings a snatch of an old ballad, her voice echoing sweetly off the tiled walls. You recognise the melody, something about love lost and found at the edge of a river. Mainstream fact, music was as much a part of bathing as soap or towels, and nobles often kept musicians on hand to play as they soaked, blurring the lines between bath and celebration. A slender woman with a scar along her jaw gestures for you to join her at the edge of the pool. "Have you ever had a lavender scrub?" she asks, holding out a handful of crushed herbs mixed with coarse salt. You shake your head and she laughs. Then you're in for a treat. The sensation is at once abrasive and soothing, earthy, honest, a reminder that beauty can be a little rough around the edges. "Makes the skin glow," she says, then adds, "Or so they claim. Maybe it just makes us feel like Roman empresses for an hour." You relax further, letting the warmth seep into your muscles. The candlelight flickers, catching the blue veins beneath your skin. Someone passes around a flask of mulled wine, tart with orange peel and spices. A playful debate breaks out. Which is the real secret to lasting youth? Good wine or a cold plunge? No one agrees, but everyone laughs. At the far end of the room, an older woman, her hair streaked silver, her posture regal even in repose, shares a story about her own mother, who supposedly bathed with a toad in her basin to ward off curses. Historians still debate whether such remedies did anything but amuse the neighbours, she quips, but my mother swore by it, never had a single wart in her life. The room erupts in laughter, and you sense that every story here has grown a little more magical with each retelling. A younger woman slides into the water beside you, her fingers wrinkled and pink from the heat. She grins. You must be new. Just wait. The best part is the bathhouse whispers. She winks, lowering her voice. All the real secrets come out in the steam. The walls here remember more than the priests do. You nod, feeling the truth in her words. In this room, truth and exaggeration blend as easily as oil and water. As the steam thickens, the conversation drifts from gossip to dreams, hopes for marriages, fears of childbirth, the endless pressure to be beautiful and obedient. Sometimes I think it would be easier to be a goose, says one woman, sending a ripple of giggles around the pool. All they worry about is bread. You laugh, picturing a flock of noblewomen honking their way across the castle lawns. The image is so ridiculous that for a moment all the anxieties of status and reputation fade away. Someone starts humming a tune, the kind that gets stuck in your head for days. Another takes up the melody, and soon the whole room is singing softly, music mingling with steam, echoing in the high tiled ceiling. There's no audience, no need for perfection, just women singing together, their voices weaving a delicate net of belonging. As the song dies away, a pair of friends begin an impromptu game, balancing scented candles on their foreheads as they float. The challenge is to see who can last the longest without tipping over. A princess of balance and beauty, one declares, crowning the winner with a crown of lemon peels. Mainstream fact: medieval noblewomen invented countless little games to pass the time, from riddles and wordplay to feats of dexterity. Sometimes as a way to outwit boredom, sometimes as an excuse to let their guard down. The room begins to empty as the water cools and the fire dwindles. Women slip out, wrapping themselves in linen and laughter, their cheeks glowing with warmth and mischief. A few linger, exchanging final whispers and promises. One stops to look at her reflection in a polished silver mirror, tilting her head, practicing a smile she'll wear at tonight's feast. You dry your hands, rising slowly, reluctant to leave the gentle cocoon of the bathhouse. You realise that you've seen something rare and precious. Women at ease, stripped of pretense, trading stories and secrets in a space all their own. The castle may be built of cold stone and guarded gates, but here, in this steamy, laughter-filled haven, pleasure is as simple and as complex as a shared song or a half-told joke. You step back through the linen curtain, feeling lighter, softer somehow. The world outside feels sharper by contrast. Down the hall, the echoes of the bathhouse linger, a soft reminder that even in a world ruled by men and law, women have always carved out their own realms of comfort and conspiracy. Your footsteps trace the damp prints left by others. You pause outside the door, listening one last time as a snatch of song drifts through the stone. The scent of lavender and candle wax clings to your skin. You smile, already wondering what whispers tomorrow's steam will bring. You step out from the steam-thick air of the bathhouse, skin tingling, feeling for a moment like you've slipped your old self off with the bathwater. For a while, you just drift through the castle's shadowed passages, the hush broken only by distant footfalls and the shush of a draught squeezing past a loose window shutter. The castle never really sleeps, you realise. It just changes its shape, the way candlelight reshapes shadows on old walls. But tonight, you aren't ready to join the world of grand halls and public duties, not yet. There's a secret somewhere up ahead, just out of reach, and it calls you forward like a thread through a labyrinth. Your hand skims along the cold stone, fingertips brushing carved niches and iron sconces. You pass a servant girl hurrying with a jug of wine. She barely looks up, but her mouth quirks with a half-knowing smile as if she recognizes something in your hunger for the hidden. She disappears around a bend and leaves you facing a door you've never tried before. A narrow arched panel with a heavy lock and a handle polished smooth by centuries of quiet, determined hands. A quick glance down the corridor. No one is watching. You press your ear to the wood and catch the faintest scratch of a page being turned. The soft glow of a candle leaks from beneath the door. You hesitate only a moment longer, then slip inside. The chamber is smaller than you expect, cluttered with books stacked in every possible space, on low stools on the bare stone floor, even in untidy piles along the window seat. The walls are lined with shelves so packed that the volumes bow outward, their spines cracked and their covers faded. There's a desk in the corner, strewn with papers, a brass ink pot, and a quill left uncapped. The window is propped open just enough to let in the night air, and the breeze makes the candle flame leap and dance across the pages. You close the door quietly behind you and step forward, the hush settling around you like a velvet robe. The smell of old parchment and wax is rich and comforting, like being wrapped in memory. For a moment, you wonder who risks so much to build this trove. Books are treasures in this age. Rare, hand-copied, sometimes illuminated in colours more costly than gemstones. Each one here is a fortune, and not all of them are meant for prying eyes. A movement catches your attention. In the corner, curled up in an ancient armchair, sits a figure, barely more than a shape in the shadows, knees tucked beneath her. She looks up, candlelight flickering on her cheek, and gives you a wry smile. "Couldn't sleep?" she asks, voice soft as a feather. "Or are you searching for something you're not supposed to find?" There's a mischief in her tone that's hard to resist. She gestures to the cluttered shelves. "Pick one. No one ever leaves here empty-handed." You move to the nearest stack, fingers trembling. The books are heavier than you expect. Their leather soft with age, pages crackling with secrets. The first one you open is a psalter, familiar, full of prayers and miniature paintings of saints with sad eyes. But tucked between its pages you find a slip of parchment, scrawled with a verse in a looser, more playful hand. You can't help but grin. It seems even saints have their mischief. You set the psalter aside and reach for a second volume, this one bound in deep blue and edged with faded gold. The title is in Latin, but the pages inside are English, handwritten and alive with marginal doodles. A stag, a leaping hare, a woman's face with eyes too large for her head. The handwriting itself is bold and slanted, almost impatient. You read the first lines. "In shadows after vespers she found him, hands ink-stained, mouth sweet with plum." It's a poem, lush and daring. Someone's secret, hidden in plain sight. The girl in the armchair shifts, stretching her legs. "That one's popular," she says, her voice amused. "Everyone wants the stories they're not supposed to have." She watches you, eyes glinting. "Did you know Lady Isabeau used to write poems like that for her own amusement? Of course, she burned them all before she was married, or so she claimed." You laugh quietly, remembering tales you've heard in passing, of noble women who composed verses about longing and pleasure, passing them among friends until the church caught wind and declared the practice dangerous for the soul. Historians still argue whether women really authored so many secret works, or if later generations simply wanted to believe they did. The truth, you suspect, is hidden in these very pages. You explore further, running your fingers along the spines. Here is a treatise on astrology, the margins alive with tiny sunbursts and odd symbols. There, a book of fables, the animals rendered in bright paint with little regard for realism. A lion wearing a crown, a fox with a sly human grin. Every book is a world, and each world offers its own forbidden pleasure. You reach for a slender volume bound in faded red, its title nearly worn away. Inside you find a series of stories, each one more daring than the last. One tells of a knight who falls in love with his squire, another of a merchant's daughter who disguises herself as a monk to escape an unwanted marriage. You pause over one particular page, where the scribe's careful hand has slipped, the ink blotted and the sentence abandoned. Did they fear discovery? Did someone enter the room just as the words grew too bold? You close the book gently, your mind spinning. In a world where so much is forbidden, knowledge, desire, even idle curiosity, the very act of reading becomes an act of quiet rebellion. The girl in the chair seems to sense your thoughts. It's easier to hide ideas than people, she murmurs, reaching for her own well-thumbed book. But the best ideas always find their way back out again. They grow in the dark, like mushrooms. She grins, and you can't help but grin back. You take your chosen book, a collection of French tales, its cover stamped with a single silver fleur-de-lis, and settle into a nearby stool. The story you begin is light at first, full of clever wordplay and riddles, but as you turn the pages, the tone shifts. Lovers meet in moonlit gardens, handmaidens exchange glances that say more than words, every page thrums with longing. You find yourself swept up in the cadence, heart beating a little faster. For a while, the world slips away. The only sounds are the scratch of a quill, the flutter of a moth against the window glass, and the quiet hush as you turn another page. You discover a small drawing pressed between the leaves, a woman in a gown, one hand raised as if to beckon someone closer. The style is unfamiliar, lines quick and loose, more emotion than realism. Maybe it was drawn in haste, for someone who could never stay. You hear a soft laugh from across the room. Careful, the girl warns, that one's a bit scandalous. You arch an eyebrow. She shrugs, not at all repentant. There's a reason we keep these books here, and not in the main library. Some pleasures are best savoured in private. She pulls a volume from the shelf and holds it out. The cover is stitched with red silk thread, worn thin by handling. You take it, and find the pages filled with what can only be called illustrated stories. Images as bold as the text, the colours faded but still vibrant. The scenes are playful, sometimes risque but never cruel. You realise that these aren't just entertainments, they're acts of imagination, sketches of a freer world drawn by hands that refuse to be bound by rule. As you turn the pages, you find yourself smiling. You can almost hear the voices of those who wrote, painted, and preserved these works, the giggles, the sharp whispers, the stubborn defiance. It occurs to you that pleasure in this world is not only about bodies and moments stolen in the dark, but about minds reaching for something bigger, truer, and entirely their own. You tuck the book under your arm, suddenly bold. The girl in the chair gives you a conspiratorial wink. Bring it back when you're done, or better, add something to it. A line, a sketch, a secret. She closes her own book and rises, stretching. The world's full of watchers, she says, moving toward the door. But it's the dreamers who keep the fire burning. As she disappears into the corridor, you remain a moment longer. You place your palm flat on the desk, feeling the rough grain of the wood, the indentations left by years of hurried notes and nervous copying. You realise in this chamber of candlelight and shadows that every forbidden book is a kind of promise, of something better or braver, or at least more honest, waiting just beyond the next page. The candle gutters low. You slip your chosen volume into the crook of your arm and quietly ease open the door. The corridor outside is empty, the castle fallen silent except for the ever-present whisper of wind against the walls. You move quickly now, heart light, steps quiet as a thief's. The book feels warm against your chest, a secret treasure carried out into the wider world. As you head down the passage, you find yourself noticing things you'd missed before. A sconce askew, a painted tile chipped at the corner, the faintest outline of a message scratched into the stone. 2 initials joined by a heart. You smile knowing that stories written, whispered, or scratched on a wall are the real treasures here, more lasting than gold. You pause at the top of a staircase, looking down into the deeper dark. The castle is waiting, breathless with secrets. You take a last look at the book, then tuck it away, ready for whatever forbidden pleasure the night has left to offer. You slip quietly down the turning stair, the borrowed book still tucked close to your ribs, candle flame wobbling in the cup of your hand. Each step creaks in protest, sending faint echoes into the silence. You move as if inside a dream, alert and yet strangely untouchable, like the castle itself is holding its breath, listening for your next choice. Down here, below the level of grand banquets and garden intrigues, the world grows denser, the air thick with a faint perfume of beeswax, spilt wine, and something else you can't quite name. Maybe it's the thrill of what comes next, or maybe it's the scent of secrets themselves. You follow the laughter before you see the light, drawn by the soft music and the sense of energy that pulses through the walls. The sounds lead you through a set of heavy doors, their hinges softened by age, and suddenly you're standing at the threshold of the great hall, a space transformed for the night's masquerade. Torches flicker in golden sconces, sending sparks that chase one another up the ancient beams. The long tables, so often scenes of feasts and fights, are pushed to the sides, their surfaces loaded with trays of candied figs, glazed almonds, and bottles of dark, mysterious liqueurs. But it's not the food that draws your eyes first. It's the whirl of colour, and the strange beauty of masked figures weaving through pools of lamplight. The air is thick with the scents of orange blossom and musk, and the kind of anticipation that makes even old courtiers stand taller. Costumes swirl past you in a kaleidoscope. Velvets, feathers, tiny bells sewn along hems and sleeves. The masks themselves are masterpieces, some painted with wild animals, some with scenes of forests or flames, a few made of beaten gold or stitched velvet, and some so delicate you almost expect them to flutter away if the dancers move too quickly. You realise you're not the only one on the edge. Dozens of others linger by the archways, clutching their anonymity like a second skin. You spot a knight, tall, broad-shouldered, but hiding behind the laughing face of a jester, a plump merchant's wife disguised as a queen, her paper crown tilting rakishly. Two young men in matching fox masks, their hands never quite brushing, but never too far apart. In the flickering light, everyone becomes someone else, or perhaps you think more truly themselves. Someone presses a mask into your hand, a simple thing of painted wood and ribbon, lined in faded blue silk. Without thinking, you tie it on, feeling your own face slip away. Suddenly you're no longer an intruder in borrowed rooms, you're a shadow among shadows, a part of the evening's game. A bell rings, the dancing begins, you stand at the edge, heart hammering in your chest, as a stately pavane gives way to a wild galliard. The steps are familiar, but the energy is new. Freed from duty, everyone moves with abandon, letting the rhythm of drums and lutes lead them wherever they wish. You're swept up in a current of laughter and spinning velvet, pulled into a circle by hands you do not recognize. For a while there are only the movements, the turn, the bow, the brush of sleeve against sleeve. The masquerade gives you permission to be bolder. You mimic the laughter of a bird, the graceful tilt of a deer. Your partner, someone tall in a half mask painted like a night sky, mirrors you, and together you become something other than yourselves. The masks protect you, but they also reveal you. In the freedom to pretend, you discover new truths about desire and delight. Music crashes to a halt, then shifts into something slow and sinuous. The dancers melt away to the sides, and you find yourself face to face with a woman in a mask of gilded lilies. She offers you her hand, a soft, deliberate invitation. You accept, and together you glide to the centre of the floor. Her grip is strong, her movements sure. "I've seen you before," she murmurs, voice muffled by the velvet, "but never like this." Her words vibrate in your chest. You laugh, emboldened by anonymity. Maybe you never looked closely enough. She tilts her head, the gold petals trembling, and for a moment you sense the truth behind the mask. This is not a stranger. Perhaps it is the woman from the garden, or the bathhouse, or the book-strewn room, Or perhaps it is someone entirely new, writing a fresh story for a single night. In the end, it hardly matters. At a masquerade, everyone is both who they are and who they wish to be. The dance swirls on. You watch as couples change partners and masks change hands, sometimes exchanged with a kiss, sometimes tossed into the air like a dare. At the edge of the hall, a young page juggles candied apples while a group of handmaids try to guess which nobleman hides behind the painted wolf's grin. There are no lords or servants here, only revellers. Even the cook, you notice, wears a crimson domino and slips spiced nuts to a blushing squire. At the far end of the room, a dais is draped in velvet, scattered with cushions. On it recline a pair of minstrels, their lutes in hand, strumming tunes from distant lands. They sing of lovers separated by mountains, of clever girls who trick cruel fathers, of soldiers lost and found in the mists of war. Their harmonies weave a spell over the hall, each story another mask worn and discarded before the next begins. You find yourself drawn toward the edge of the crowd, where a small group sits in a pool of shadow, playing a game with dice and secrets. The rules are simple. Roll high, tell a story. Roll low, answer a question. You join them, the dice cool in your palm. On your turn you roll a 6 and all eyes turn to you. A story, the fox-masked youth demands. You search your mind for something suitable. I once heard, you begin, that the kitchens beneath this castle are haunted, not by ghosts, but by the laughter of cooks who once held secret feasts after midnight, using the forbidden spices meant only for the lord's table. They would bake pies laced with cinnamon and nutmeg, then serve them to the rats before daring to taste them themselves. Some say that if you listen closely you can still hear their giggles when the ovens grow warm. The group bursts into laughter, and someone pats your shoulder. Historians still argue whether such secret feasts were a real rebellion or just a story cooks told to amuse each other. You, for tonight, prefer to believe every word. The dice move on, and so do you. The night deepens, the music grows wilder, and the games more daring. A new round of dancers takes the floor, this time blindfolded, led only by their partners' voices. Somewhere near the window, a pair of masked lovers slips away into the shadows, and you catch a snatch of their whispered promises. You think about how, in a world so bound by rules and surveillance, anonymity can be the most delicious pleasure of all. At the heart of the hall, the lord of the castle, unrecognisable in a horned mask and crimson robes, raises a goblet in silent salute. He does not speak, but his presence is a signal. Tonight, the old order is suspended, rank is a rumour, hierarchy a memory. For a few hours, everyone can taste the sweet, dizzying possibility of freedom. You wander through the hall, pausing at a table stacked with painted cards. A fortune teller sits behind them, her face hidden by a veil of peacock feathers. She beckons you closer. "A question?" she asks. You hesitate, then nod. She lays 3 cards before you, a crown, a heart, a key. She smiles, tracing the shapes. Power, love, and secrets. All are within your grasp tonight. But remember, when the masks come off, what will you keep and what will you let slip away? Her words echo in your mind as you move on, uncertain whether they are prophecy or simply good advice. As midnight approaches, a hush falls over the hall. The musicians strike up a final tune, a haunting melody that winds through the crowd like smoke. All the revellers, masked and unmasked, noble and humble, form a great circle, hands joined. The dance is slow, deliberate, a ritual as old as the castle itself. You move in time with the others, feeling your heartbeat match the rhythm, your mind drifting with the music. As the last note fades, the circle breaks. Laughter and applause fill the room. Masks are lifted, faces revealed, some to surprise, some to delight, a few to dismay. You untie your own mask, the silk damp with sweat, and breathe in the cool air. The woman in the gilded lily mask stands before you once more, her face now visible, familiar, kind. marked by a freckle at her jaw you somehow never noticed before. You smile. She grins back, and for a moment the world narrows to just the two of you, connected by a secret night and a borrowed face. Around you, others gather their cloaks, whispering promises to meet again. The masquerade is ending, but its magic lingers, carried in the scent of musk and orange blossom, in the memory of steps traced on ancient stone, in the knowledge that just for tonight, pleasure and freedom wore each other's masks. You slip away as the hall empties, your borrowed book pressed close once more. The corridors are quiet now, save for the last few stragglers, tipsy, giddy, laughing into the hush. You pause at a window, the cool night air brushing your cheeks, and let the memory of the masquerade settle into your bones. The masks are off, the music has faded, but somewhere, in the shadowed corners of the castle, another dance is already beginning. You linger at the threshold as the last notes of music fade, watching the masquerade dissolve into candlelit memory. The castle feels different now, emptier, echoing with the ghosts of laughter and secrets traded behind painted masks. You slip into a side passage, footsteps nearly silent on the ancient stone. Somewhere behind you, servants begin the slow work of cleaning up after the revelry, sweeping up fallen feathers, gathering stray ribbons, piecing together the evidence of a night well spent. Tonight you crave quieter magic, the kind that lingers in the spaces between people, soft as a sigh, sharp as a sideways glance. You follow the winding hall toward the servants' quarters, a world behind a world, just as intricate and hidden as any royal chamber. Here the walls are plain, but the air hums with stories. You pause at a half-open door drawn by the flicker of lamplight and the low sound of conversation. Inside, you find a group of handmaids gathered around a battered wooden table, faces flushed from laughter, fingers busy with bits of mending, braiding, or simply picking at the crusts of a shared midnight snack. Someone's poured cider into mismatched cups. A single beeswax candle stutters at the centre, casting shadows that dance along the worn walls. They glance up, momentarily wary, but one of them, a girl with mischievous eyes and a dimpled chin, waves you in. "Don't be shy," she says, patting the bench beside her. "If you're awake at this hour, you're either working too hard or you're in need of a good story. Lucky for you, we have both." You take your seat, shoulders relaxing into the warmth of shared company. The world of lords and ladies might be built on rules and rituals, but here, in the handmaid's domain, everything feels a little softer, a little more true. The talk drifts easily, first about the night's masquerade, then the day's small dramas. "Did you see Lady Anne's mask?" one whispers, eyes wide. "All pearls and silver thread. I swear she nearly lost it when her slipper caught on the stairs." Laughter ripples around the table, but beneath the chatter, other conversations flow quietly. Exchanges of information, bits of gossip. Small favours asked and granted. Someone produces a spool of blue silk ribbon, rolling it across the table to another girl who grins her thanks. "Payment for covering my shift tomorrow," she explains. "Don't let the steward see. He'd sooner eat his hat than let us have a scrap for ourselves." It becomes clear that handmaids have their own economy, their own currency of favours, secrets, and the little treasures that slip through noble fingers. Ribbons, buttons, a leftover apple tart smuggled from the kitchens. These small luxuries exchanged and guarded are worth more than gold. You watch as they barter quietly, their glances full of meaning, their alliances shifting like shadows cast by the candle. At the far end of the table, a woman with grey streaks in her hair, clearly the oldest, and by the deference of the others, the wisest, leans in to share a story. Her voice is low, almost hypnotic. "Did you ever hear about the ring Lady Cecily lost?" she begins. "Gold, set with a sapphire. She claimed it vanished while she was bathing, but everyone knows she slipped it to her favourite maid for safekeeping." She winks. "The real trick is keeping such gifts hidden from prying eyes, and keeping your head if the lady's husband comes looking." A ripple of laughter tinged with nervousness. The youngest handmaid, no more than 13, clutches a tiny glass bead, as if it's a priceless jewel. My sister told me, she confides, that Lady Cecily keeps a whole box of trinkets in her pillowcase, things the Lord gave her and things she took back after he forgot. The others nod. There's a kind of quiet pride in such stories, of cleverness, of survival, of finding small freedoms in a world built on obedience. You realise that for the handmaids, the castle is both sanctuary and snare. Their lives are defined by proximity, always near power, but never quite holding it. And yet, within these constraints, they have learned to carve out space for themselves, to trade secrets, to form alliances, to bend the rules with a sly smile. Someone produces a battered deck of cards. "Let's see whose luck is strongest tonight," she declares, shuffling with practiced hands. The game is a simple one, full of bluff and bravado. As the cards are dealt, the conversation turns to dreams. "If you could leave tomorrow," one girl muses, "where would you go?" There's a brief, reverent hush. Answers spill out. A cottage by the sea, a market stall in a far-off city, a life of adventure or a quiet home. The answers are wistful, but no one seems bitter. Here, in the Handmaid's world, dreams are currency too. Midway through the game, a knock at the door brings a hush. A young page slips in, cheeks red from running, and hands a folded note to one of the older handmaids. She reads it quickly, then burns it in the candle flame. "Nothing important," she says, but her eyes say otherwise. The others don't press, but you can sense the ripple of curiosity. Here, news travels fast, but loyalty travels faster. You begin to understand the true power of the handmaids. They are the eyes and ears of the castle, moving unseen through its every chamber. They know which lord is nursing a grudge, which lady waits for news from a distant lover, which cupboard holds the best wine and which window can be pried open from the outside. If you want to survive, or thrive, within these walls, it pays to have a friend among the handmaids. As the night deepens, stories become confessions. One girl admits she's hidden a book of love poems in her mattress, another that she sometimes sneaks into the garden at dawn to meet a stable boy. There's no judgment here, just quiet understanding and perhaps a bit of envy. The older woman shares her own secret. "When I was young, I helped my mistress write letters to a knight she'd never met. I learned her secrets, and she learned mine. We never spoke of it, but I think she loved me for it." The table falls silent for a moment, each girl turning her own thoughts over in the flickering light. Mainstream fact: many noblewomen depended on their maids to pass secret letters, arrange clandestine meetings, and protect their reputations. Without these alliances, most courtly intrigues would have fizzled before they even began. You look around the table and realise that, while history tends to focus on kings and knights, the real stories are often written in the margins, by those whose names are rarely recorded, whose hands shape the fate of those above them. You feel a swell of gratitude for being allowed into this world, if only for a night. Someone opens the window, letting in the cool breath of early morning. The candle flickers. Outside you can hear the faint rustle of leaves, the first tentative chirp of a bird greeting the dawn. The mood softens, the conversation growing quieter. You sense the girls thinking of beds, of duties waiting when the castle wakes. As you rise to leave, the girl with the dimpled chin presses a small ribbon into your palm. "For luck," she says, grinning, "or for whatever trouble you find next." You tuck it away, feeling its softness, a reminder that sometimes the smallest treasures are the ones we guard most fiercely. You step into the corridor, the laughter and stories of the handmaids echoing behind you. The castle is still, caught between night and morning. You wonder about the other stories unfolding in the hidden corners, the alliances being forged, the promises whispered into the dark. You head back toward the grander parts of the castle, heart lighter for having shared in the handmaids' quiet rebellions. The world outside their chamber feels a little sharper, a little more uncertain, but you carry their luck and their wisdom into whatever comes next. You slip from the hush of the handmaid's world, ribbon clenched in your palm, and drift through the sleeping castle, guided now by the low hum of voices rising up from beneath your feet. There's a pulse to the lower halls, a sense that not everyone is as ready for sleep as the silent upper chambers would suggest. Shadows move at the far end of a passage. You follow them, curiosity ever your lantern. The smell changes as you descend, from lavender and linen to something earthier, richer, tinged with grape skins and damp stone. At the bottom of a narrow stair, behind a battered oak door with a brass handle worn smooth, you find yourself in the castle's wine cellar. The air is cool and thick, fragrant with the memory of 1,000 casks stacked high and stretching into the dark. Lanterns hang at intervals, casting golden pools of light on ancient barrels and racks crowded with bottles, some so dusty you wonder if they were ever meant to be drunk, or simply admired as treasures from lost feasts. But the real treasure is in the far corner, where a cluster of figures huddle around a battered table. Their laughter is soft, a kind of careful joy, restrained but very much alive. You edge closer, careful not to startle them, and realise this isn't a gathering of stuffy old stewards or greedy cellarers sneaking extra sips. No, this is a gathering for pleasure, a game night in the cellar, half hidden from the world above. The game is simple at first: dice clatter, coins change hands, and the rules seem made up as they go along. You watch as a tall boy with a crooked smile wins a round, cackling as he pockets a copper coin. His rival, a rosy-cheeked kitchen maid, narrows her eyes and demands a rematch. Winner takes the last peach, she says, and everyone groans with mock despair. The fruit has become legendary, hoarded from last week's delivery and now the star prize. You take a seat on a barrel, feeling the cold seep through your clothes. There's a cup of rough wine waiting, pressed into your hand by a woman with flower on her sleeve. First round's for courage, she jokes. Second round's for truth. You take a sip and nearly cough. The wine is sharp, almost biting, but the taste isn't what matters. It's the warmth that follows, the heat rising up from your belly to your cheeks. A hand slaps the table. Truth or dare, the game shifts, the stakes growing sweeter and stranger. Dare! A boy shouts, eyes alight. He's told to recite a love poem to the nearest cask, and does so with such tragic flair that the whole table erupts in giggles. Truth! Calls the next. A woman who, after a moment's pause, confesses to having slipped an extra roll from the kitchen last Sunday, and shared it with her favourite hound. The group roars their approval. Generosity is always the best kind of crime. The dares grow bolder, but never cruel. Someone must sneak across the room and snatch a candle from the steward's desk. Another is dared to toast the king with vinegar. The truths too become more daring. Whispered confessions of love for a distant stable hand, of secret plans to leave the castle when the roads are clear, of stolen kisses in the hayloft after dusk. You realise, listening, that these small risks and rewards are as precious as any formal courtship above. In a world built on surveillance and suspicion, the ability to play, to laugh, to dare is its own form of rebellion. A bottle is produced, spun upon the table. Whoever it points to must share a secret, no matter how small. You feel the room lean closer, breath held in anticipation. I once danced barefoot in the moonlight on the ramparts, confesses one boy, pretending to be a prince. The group applauds. Another quieter girl admits she can read. Taught in secret by her brother, she claims, with pride and fear mingled in her voice. Historians still argue whether literacy was truly rare among castle servants, or if they simply hid their skills to protect themselves. Here, knowledge is both shield and weapon, and every admission is accepted without judgment. Someone fetches a small drum, and the mood shifts again. Now the game is one of rhythm, each person adding a beat or a clapping pattern to a growing, stumbling tune. Laughter fills the cellar, bright and reckless, echoing off the stone. You catch yourself grinning, heart pounding in time. There's something freeing about this. The anonymity, the lack of rank, the simple pleasure of being together and letting the world above fade for a little while. At some point, someone uncorks a bottle of better wine, saved, you learn, for just such a night as this. Cups are passed, toasts are raised, to secrets kept and secrets told, to friends who remember and friends who forget, to the last peach. The mood grows softer as the night deepens, the stories more wistful. A kitchen boy speaks of a mother left behind in the village, sending her love in the form of dried apples hidden in his pocket. A washerwoman remembers her childhood by the river, swimming with friends she'll never see again. The cellar becomes a sanctuary, a place where longing and laughter blend into something sweet and fleeting. You glance around and notice a tapestry hung on the far wall. A strange place for art, you think, but upon closer look, you see that it's an old, faded thing, covered in little more than geometric patterns, or so it seems, until someone leans in and points out a detail. 2 hands meeting beneath a table, a dog curled around a wine jug, a pair of shoes slipped off and hidden in the shadows. The tapestry, you realise, tells a secret history of cellar gatherings past. Every year, a new detail is added by someone who knows the old code, an embroidery for every unforgettable dare, a stitched symbol for each new friend or mischief made. Quirky as it seems, the tradition runs deep, a visual diary for those who know where to look. Someone produces a small knife and begins carefully carving a date into the underside of the table. A new notch for a new night. So, we don't forget, they say, and everyone nods, solemn for a moment. History, it seems, is made in these low-lit corners, as much by laughter as by swords or crowns. As the game wanes, attention turns to other pleasures. Plates of cheese and dried cherries are brought out from behind a stack of barrels. A loaf of bread, half stale but sweet with honey, is broken and shared. You taste everything, not for hunger, but for the sense of belonging. The conversation shifts again, becoming more philosophical. Why do you think the lords play at feasts while we play at games, someone wonders? Aren't we all just trying to forget the rules for a little while? A thoughtful hush. Someone answers, because up there, you can't ever lose, at least not in public. But down here, it's safe to risk a little. No one keeps score, and everyone gets a second chance. You nod, understanding. The games in the cellar are a way of levelling the world, if only for a night. The group is smaller now, some having drifted away, others dozing against the barrels. You watch as 2 friends lean in close, sharing a secret that's too quiet for even you to overhear. It occurs to you that trust, here, is not a luxury but a necessity. These games, these whispered stories, are the glue that binds a scattered, shifting family. Maybe, you think, every castle has its cellar, a place where the rules of daylight don't quite reach, and every forbidden pleasure finds a home. You rise to stretch, legs stiff from sitting so long. The cellar feels changed now, warmer, more familiar. Someone offers you one last cup of wine, and you accept, savouring the taste. It's better than the first cup, though perhaps it's just the sweetness of company. As you slip away, you look back at the tapestry. The hands, the dog, the shoes, all reminders that every secret gathering leaves its mark, if only for those who know where to search. The candlelight winks off the rim of your cup, and you carry that glimmer with you as you climb the stairs, back toward the world of rules, duty, and names. You emerge into the corridor, greeted by the first grey hints of dawn. The castle is waking, the world above stirring to life. But you know something now. Beneath every great hall and every shining feast, there are games in the cellar, places where laughter outlasts the wine, and pleasure comes not from what is given, but from what is shared. The sun is only just scraping gold across the horizon, brushing the ramparts and towers with sleepy warmth, when you emerge from the cellars and back into the tangled heart of the castle. The hush of morning is not quite stillness. It's a subtle, expectant breath. The castle suspended between one set of rules and the next. The heavy doors are propped for air, the long corridors, just swept, bear the scent of damp stone and lye. The world above stairs has little inkling of what transpired last night below, nor of the quiet, delicate rebellion still playing out as the day unfurls. You find yourself drifting toward the stables, drawn by the sound of soft knickers and the scrape of straw. Outside, a page is mucking out a stall, his hair tousled by wind and sleep, but he hardly looks up as you pass. There is no suspicion in the morning, only the business of the day beginning. But your gaze catches something unusual. A slender figure slipping through a side door, her cap pulled low over her brow, the hem of her cloak muddied by last night's dew. She pauses at the tack room, checks quickly over her shoulder, and disappears inside. You recognize her then, the noblewoman from last night's masquerade, her boldness barely disguised by the rough-cut clothes. She's no handmaid, and no one's fool. You follow quietly as she moves with the sureness of someone well-practiced at being invisible. The tack room smells of leather and hay, and the air is thick with secrets. She tugs off her cap, shaking free a spill of hair, and glances your way, a spark of mischief in her eyes. "I won't ask if you followed me," she says, voice low, "because I know you did." She tosses you a stable boy's cloak, just your size, and nods toward the door. If we're quick, the morning guards won't bother with questions. There is the flutter of excitement again, the promise of another forbidden pleasure. Adventure. You pull the cloak over your clothes, feeling the scratch of rough wool, the unfamiliar heft of a leather strap slung across your shoulder. She leads the way into the yard, her movements careful but not hurried. The horses whicker and paw the ground, restless with the scent of coming sunlight. She chooses the smallest, swiftest mare, dark-eyed and dainty, and motions for you to saddle up. You hesitate, remembering all the stories of women who dressed as men to ride at night, to escape, to fight. Historians still argue whether these tales are mostly myth, but the truth, you realize, matters less than the moment. You swing into the saddle, boots slipping in the stirrups. She mounts with practiced ease, cloak fluttering around her like wings. For a moment you're just two riders at dawn, no titles, no obligations, no masks save for the ones you make for yourselves. The castle gates loom ahead, but she leads you instead toward a narrow postern, half hidden by ivy and shadow. A word to the sleepy guard, a wink, and you are through, out into the misty fields beyond the walls. The world opens, fields stretch to the edge of vision, dew silvering the grass, birdsong threading through the hush. You ride together side by side, the mare's hooves muffled by soft earth. For the first time all night, you feel something like real freedom. No eyes watching, no steps to follow, only the wild, uncertain road ahead. Timeless sleep. She laughs, a bright, unguarded sound, and you realize how rare laughter is in the daytime, how often it is traded for duty or silence. "My father would faint if he saw me now," she says, voice light as birds on the breeze. "He thinks I spend my mornings with a prayer book." Her face, half shadowed by her cap, glows with a secret delight. "But I'd rather know what the sun feels like on my face. I'd rather see the world as it really is." You ride past a cluster of cottages, smoke rising from early fires, the scent of baking bread soft on the air. A group of children chase a goose through the grass, shrieking with laughter. They pause to watch you, their eyes wide. Two strangers on horses, one dressed as a boy, the other nearly as wild. One child waves, and the noblewoman lifts her cap in greeting, her smile genuine, free of the stiff politeness she wears at court. You ride on, following the winding track past orchards and hedgerows. The noblewoman reins in her mare by a low stone wall, slips down from the saddle, and beckons you to join her. Together you sit, legs dangling, the world sprawling out before you, fields, woods, a distant glint of water. She reaches into her cloak and pulls out a heel of bread, a wedge of cheese, 2 apples. "Provisions for outlaws," she says, tossing you an apple. You bite in, juice sweet and sharp on your tongue. The moment is so ordinary, so quietly perfect that you almost forget the risks you've taken to be here. But she does not. "Sometimes I think the whole world is just a castle," she says quietly, "and everyone spends their life finding the back doors." Her words settle between you, weighty and true. You realize how much of life is about what can't be seen, the pleasures that must be hidden, freedom, laughter, a morning ride in borrowed clothes. You talk as you eat, your words winding as lazily as the stream in the valley below. She tells you stories of courtly intrigues, of lessons in Latin and swordplay, of nights spent tracing maps by candlelight, dreaming of places she'll never see. "I once wrote a letter to a queen in Spain," she confides, eyes bright. "Never sent it, of course, but I like the thought that she might have read it anyway." You offer your own tales, of cellar games, of the handmaid's ribbons, of forbidden books read by candlelight. She listens, her face alive with delight, nodding encouragement, laughing at all the right moments. "I wish more people would tell the truth," she says, "even if it's just once in a while. Historians still argue whether the truth even matters, or if stories are what shape the world. I'd rather have a good story than a boring truth any day." The hush falls, gentle and easy. The sun is fully up now, the world awake, but the field remains yours for a little longer. She pulls off her cap, shakes out her hair, and for a heartbeat looks like nothing more than a young woman, free and unafraid. At last she stands, brushing crumbs from her cloak. "We should go back," she says, not regretful but realistic. "If we're missed, the game's up. And besides, I've an appointment with a very dull embroidery hoop." You mount again, retracing your path, the castle rising in the distance like something from a dream, imposing, inescapable, but never quite as solid as it seems. You slip back through the postern gate, your heart thumping with triumph and nerves. No one challenges you. The guard, half asleep, offers only a slow nod. Inside the stable yard you dismount, return the borrowed cloak and watch as she melts back into the castle's morning routine, the bold outlaw replaced by the dutiful daughter once more. But she glances back, just once, and the look you share is full of the night's secret, unspoken promise. This isn't the end. You move through the castle, changed by the taste of freedom. You see it everywhere now, in the way a kitchen girl sneaks a tart from a tray, in the hurried meeting of hands beneath a staircase, in the laughter that flares and dies as a group of boys tumble out of a side room, faces flushed with mischief. You pass through the hall, now bright with sunlight, and spot a tapestry you hadn't noticed before. It's old, colours faded, but you see a young woman astride a horse, her hair streaming behind her, chased by a figure with a crown who is either laughing or cursing. It's impossible to tell. The story is half hidden in the stitches, just like every secret in this place. You pause in a quiet alcove, the apple core still in your hand, and let yourself savour the taste of the morning. You wonder how many others have stolen such moments, have dared to remake the world in the hour before breakfast. You know that you'll never see the castle in quite the same way again. Every door is a possibility, every shadow a secret. Back in your own room, you peel off the stable boy's cloak, shaking out the dust, the scent of horse and wild grass. You hide it away, just in case. There will be other mornings, other escapes, other pleasures to pursue in the hidden hours. You stretch out on your bed, bone-tired and smiling, heart full of sunlight and borrowed freedom. The world outside the castle walls is wide, uncertain, and yours, at least for a while. You let your eyes close, dreams drifting in with the warmth of the rising sun, knowing that the best stories are the ones you live, even if only for a single forbidden morning. Sleep clings to you like a second skin as you rise later that morning, the memory of dawn's freedom still humming in your blood. The castle is alive now with the clamour of daily life. The bell for the noonday meal, the clash of kitchen pots, the thump and drag of heavy tapestries being beaten for dust in the corridors. You step out into the fray, every sense sharpened by your secret adventures. The world feels new, and you walk with a lightness that only those who have tasted a forbidden sunrise can know. The main hall is flooded with sunlight, and the court is gathered for the midday meal. Trays of bread and honey, salted fish, poached pears, and steaming pots of spiced wine crowd the table. You slide into place among the lesser folk. No one questions where you've been, and you return the favour by ignoring the tired eyes and flushed cheeks of those who snuck in late just as you did. The tapestry-lined walls are a riot of colour, each panel depicting stories older than memory, battles won, beasts slain, saints performing miracles, and, if you know where to look, moments far more intimate and mysterious. It is there, in those woven stories, that you find yourself drawn after the meal. The feast breaks up, the courtiers drifting away to naps or duties or gossip in the gardens, but you linger near the tapestry room, as though pulled by an invisible thread. It's cooler here, quieter. Dust motes float in the angled sunlight, and the air smells of wool, dye, and ancient, well-kept secrets. The walls are crowded with enormous, intricate tapestries, works of art that took years, sometimes decades, to complete. You pass scenes of jousts, banquets, and coronations, but your eyes are drawn to the borders and backgrounds where the real stories hide. A woman's slipper beneath a table, a hand passing a scroll behind a column, a face peeking through the leaves of a stylized garden. These are not accidents. They are the private language of those who made them, and of those who knew how to read them. You sit on a low bench, trailing your fingers over the fringe of one tapestry, letting the pattern tell you its story. This one shows a garden, fruit-laden and lush, with ladies in trailing gowns picking apples and pears. At first glance, it's an innocent scene, Edenic almost. But you notice the sly fox curled at a lady's feet, the two birds perched together in a rose bush, a pair of gloves laid carefully on a bench. You remember, with a smile, the garden pleasures of the night before, and wonder how many real moments like that were stitched into these silken threads. A steward's apprentice passes behind you, arms full of repair tools. She stops to catch her breath and, seeing your interest, gestures for you to join her at the far end of the room. There, she points out a corner of tapestry that's being restitched. "Look," she whispers, glancing around to be sure you're alone. "This bit was pulled out on purpose. My aunt told me, when the mistress of the castle quarrelled with her lord, she had her own handmaid snip out the section with the love knot. She said it was bad luck to leave a broken heart hanging on the wall." You examine the spot, a faint outline of what once was, now being remade, the new thread a shade too bright. You realise that tapestries are not just decorations, nor merely chronicles of famous deeds. They are living things, changed and rewritten by those who care for them. Each addition or subtraction tells a story, a marriage, a betrayal, the birth of a child, the death of a favourite pet. You imagine a world in which every love affair, every loss, every secret hope is recorded not in ink but in thread. You move from tapestry to tapestry, letting your eyes adjust to the dimness and the riot of colour. You find dragons with red-rimmed eyes, their tails curled protectively around a hidden pair of lovers. You see a knight with his arm around a maiden, the gesture so subtle you'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. You spot in the corner of a hunting scene a tiny squirrel perched on a branch, clutching a gold coin. A secret joke, perhaps, or a private message for a beloved friend. You think of all the hands that worked on these pieces, the noble ladies tracing patterns, the patient embroiderers bent over their frames by candlelight, the apprentices knotting threads and sneaking glances at their elders. Mainstream fact: in noble households, tapestry work was both an art and a social necessity, bringing together women and girls from across the household, blurring class lines in shared labour and whispered stories. You notice a pattern. Certain motifs repeat from one tapestry to the next. A single rose, always red, a pair of doves in flight, a broken wheel tucked into a border. You begin to suspect that there is a code here, one you only half understand. Perhaps these are marks of the family, or symbols of hidden alliances, or clues to lost loves. Historians still argue whether these repetitions are the work of tradition, superstition, or some unbroken chain of memory handed down from weaver to weaver. A young noblewoman enters, trailing her hand along the woven deer of the forest scene. She sits beside you, eyes bright with the thrill of secrets half told. "My mother says every tapestry is a confession," she whispers. "She says the best ones tell the truth about what the family wants to hide. See here?" She points to a corner where a pair of rabbits huddle under a bush. "That's my grandmother and her favourite handmaid when they were girls." They used to meet in the kitchen garden and pretend to be the princess and the witch. No one was supposed to know, but my great-grandfather had it stitched into the winter panel anyway. He said, "Let them remember what joy looks like, even in cold seasons." You laugh with her, feeling the warmth of 100 remembered stories, the way memory can be preserved in the soft shimmer of silk. "Sometimes," she says, "I think the tapestries know more about us than we do about ourselves." A servant arrives, bearing a needlework frame and a basket of coloured thread. The noblewoman picks out a pale blue, knots it carefully, and begins to work on a section near the bottom edge, a border of wild violets. "I'm not very good at this," she confides, her needle flashing in and out, "but I like to imagine what I'd put in if I were brave. Maybe a lock of hair, or a tiny embroidered key, something that only I would understand." Her hands are steady, her eyes intent, and you wonder how many women have used their stitches to keep secrets safe. The afternoon passes in quiet company, the only sounds the click of needles, the rustle of wool, the far-off clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Now and then, another visitor comes to admire the work. A tutor looking for a lost pupil, a page delivering a message, a nursemaid with a fretful child. All pause to study the tapestries, and all linger a little longer than necessary, as if the stories in thread are more interesting than anything the day might bring. Later, as the light slants through the high windows, you wander to the last tapestry, a new piece, unfinished, the lower half a tangle of loose threads. It depicts a banquet, all the figures blurred except one. A woman seated at the centre, her face half hidden, her hand resting on a goblet of wine. Her other hand is empty, waiting. The air around her is alive with tension, expectation, longing. You stare at her for a long time, feeling as if she's looking right back at you, inviting you into her story. You reach out to touch the edge of the tapestry, fingers brushing the soft fringe. For a moment you feel connected, not just to the women who wove these stories, but to everyone who has ever had a secret, a hope, a love too dangerous to speak aloud. You realise that, in its own way, the tapestry room is as sacred as any chapel, a place where memory is kept, where truths are hidden in plain sight, where pleasure and pain are stitched side by side in endless patient patterns. You return to your room as evening falls, your mind full of images and meanings you cannot quite put into words. The day has spun away like a spool of thread, drawing you deeper into the fabric of the castle's secret life. You know, as you slip beneath your coverlet and close your eyes, that the stories will follow you into your dreams, woven into the tapestry of your own heart, waiting to be remembered and one day told. You wake in the pale hush before dawn, the last dream's tapestry dissolving slowly, thread by luminous thread. It's quiet, not with the heavy hush of the dead of night, but with the expectant stillness that comes just before the castle wakes. Your mind turns over all the images and secrets you've gathered. Roses in the garden, hands meeting beneath the table, the bright laughter in the cellars, the weight of a borrowed book pressed to your chest. But it's the memory of a certain night seen in glimpses through the haze of feasts and games and tapestries. A solitary figure at the edge of revelry, armour set aside, face in shadow, that tugs you from your warm bed and draws you out once more into the uncertain light. You slip on your shoes and wrap yourself in a plain cloak, blending with the silence as you move down the narrow corridor, past snoring servants and the gentle clatter of early risers in the kitchen. You know the way by instinct, down the back stairs, past the chapel door, out into the small courtyard behind the great hall. The air is cool and damp, the stone still holding the night's chill. Beyond a line of trimmed yew, beside the well, you see him at last, the knight, alone. He is not in armour now, but in a simple shirt and hose, boots unlaced, hair loose. He sits with his back to the rising sun, one knee drawn up, hands resting in his lap. He looks both younger and older in this light, the lines of worry and wear softened. The pride and bravado of the great hall melted away. He does not see you at first, so lost is he in thought. Only when you clear your throat softly does he start, then glance over his shoulder with a sheepish smile. "Couldn't sleep?" he asks, and you shake your head, joining him on the low stone wall. The silence stretches, but it is not uncomfortable. You are both grateful for the quiet, for the chance to speak, or not, without an audience. After a time, he rubs at a scratch on his hand and sighs. "The armour never fits right, you know. They say it's made to measure, but it always pinches somewhere. And the weight. It's never just on your shoulders." His words are simple, but you hear the burden behind them. He talks slowly at first about jousts and hunts, and the endless drills expected of every night, of the unspoken code that governs each moment, chivalry, loyalty, courage, and how it sometimes feels like a story someone else wrote, a part that must be played whether it suits or not. "They say we fight for honour," he murmurs, "but most days it feels like I'm fighting just to remember who I am beneath all that steel." You listen, letting him unspool his thoughts. He speaks of battlefields and broken lances, of days on the road, and nights camped beneath a sky so dark it feels like another kind of armour. He tells you about his first real fight, how his hands shook, how the clang of swords rang in his bones for days after. Mainstream fact, the life of a medieval knight was less pageantry and more pain than the Tapestries suggest. Bruises faded, but the memory of violence, the fear of failure never quite left. He looks down at his hands, flexing his fingers. "There are things I can't say to anyone else. Not to my lord, not to my squire, not to the men who would laugh and call me soft." He hesitates, and you feel the air thicken with what's unspoken. Do you ever wish you could just stop playing your part, even for a day? You nod, thinking of disguises and borrowed mornings, the pleasure of being someone else, or no one at all. You admit that sometimes the roles you play in this castle feel heavier than any armour, that the stories woven in silk and gold thread can become a prison if you let them. You tell him how the secrets and games and escapes are more than rebellion. They're a kind of breathing, a way to stay alive. He laughs, a low, rueful sound. "I suppose we all have armour, in our own ways. Mine just happens to creak when I move." He stands, stretching, and you see the scars along his forearms, the marks of years spent protecting people who may never know his name. "Sometimes," he says, "I wonder what would happen if I just let myself be seen. No helmet, no shield, just me." He glances at you, eyes searching. Would anyone even recognize me? You think of the knight you've watched. Valiant and distant, admired by many, truly known by few. You see him now as he is, tired, brave, a little lost. "I see you," you say softly. "Not the armour, not the part you play." The words hang between you, as gentle and sharp as the dawn itself. For a while, neither of you speaks. The world is waking. Birds call from the eaves, a kitchen maid crosses the yard with a basket of eggs, the faint clang of the blacksmith's hammer rings out. But you're both somewhere else, suspended between confession and comfort. He sits again, shoulders a little lighter. "Thank you," he says, the words plain but full. You talk more now about lighter things, the games in the cellars, the strange codes of the tapestry room, the silly dares and midnight escapades that keep the darkness at bay. He grins at your stories, sharing his own in turn. Tales of mistaken identities at feasts, of tripping over his own sword in front of the Lord's daughter, of once, on a dare, sneaking honey cakes from the kitchens while dressed as a monk. Laughter comes easier now, both of you unburdened for a time. You find yourself wishing the moment could last forever, just two souls with nothing to hide. But as the sun climbs higher, you both know your places will soon call you back, the knight to his duties, you to the hidden currents of the castle's life. Before you part, he stands and offers you his hand, calloused and strong. "If you ever need someone to guard your secrets," he says, half in jest but all in earnest, "I have some practice." You take his hand, the warmth of his grip an anchor, and promise to remember. He leaves you then, striding back into the castle with his head a little higher, steps a little less heavy. You remain by the well, thinking of all the burdens people carry, some worn openly, some hidden in plain sight, and of the quiet courage it takes to lay them down, even for a moment. As you turn to go, you catch your reflection in the water, not just your face, but the shifting shapes of the sky, the stone, the sunlight. You realise that everyone in this place is more than they appear: knight and servant, lady and page, weaver and cook. The castle is a stage, but it is also a sanctuary, and every confession shared in the hush of dawn becomes a kind of freedom. The day has begun in earnest now. You walk back through the corridors, noticing the swirl of activity, the bustle in the kitchens, the clangor in the yard, the rustle of pages and needlewomen and stable boys, each finding their rhythm. You carry the knight's words with you, the echo of his confession a quiet strength. You know that stories and secrets are not only burdens, they are also bridges, linking one soul to another, lighting the way through the maze. In the hallways, you pass a group of children rehearsing a play, giggling behind their hands as they trade roles and costumes. You smile, remembering your own games, your own longing to be someone else, if only for a day. The urge to hide and reveal, to confess and pretend, runs through the castle like a golden thread, binding all its inhabitants together in ways both obvious and hidden. As the day unfolds, you keep watch for the knight. Sometimes you glimpse him, training in the yard, sword flashing in the sun, or kneeling in the chapel, head bowed. Sometimes you sense him watching you too, a silent ally in the crowd. You never speak of your conversation by the well, but the secret sits between you, a small and necessary comfort. You wonder, as the sun sets and the castle fills with the music of another feast, how many other confessions have been made in quiet corners, how many burdens lightened by a gentle word or a listening ear. Historians still argue whether such moments shaped history, or if they are merely the stuff of stories told in firelight. You suspect the truth is both, that the great events remembered in books are built on 1,000 small acts of honesty, courage and connection, and so you move through the evening changed in subtle ways, quicker to smile, slower to judge, more patient with the hidden hurts of others. You remember the knight's confession and your own, and you promise yourself to look beneath the armour, to see the person behind the part. In this castle of endless masks and shifting tapestries, that may be the most forbidden pleasure of all. Evening settles on the castle, subtle as silk, dyeing the stone with gold and rose. You wander through the corridors and find yourself drawn by the faint strains of music echoing behind a half-open door. It's the music room, the one with carved beams and tall windows that catch the last rays of the sun, their panes tinted by old glass, spilling pools of colour across the floor. The sound pulls you as surely as a tide. Each note rises and falls, sweet and haunting, like laughter half remembered from a dream. Inside, the world feels transformed. A trio of musicians, lute, viol and pipe, play quietly in the corner. Scattered along the benches and cushions are the castle's inhabitants, gathered for their own pleasure and not the approval of any lord. Some are noble, some servant, some in that invisible space between. All are changed by the spell of music and the softness of twilight. You slip into a corner, unnoticed, and let the music wash over you. There's a girl in green, her feet tucked beneath her, eyes closed as if to memorize every note. A pair of kitchen boys lean against the wall, whispering behind their hands between snatches of melody. Near the hearth, a group of women embroider, their needles flashing in rhythm with the tune, their voices weaving in and out of the music like silver thread. The room thrums with a kind of hunger, though not the sharp ache of want or longing. No, this is a subtler thing, a shared yearning for beauty, for understanding, for something that makes sense of all the other silences in the day. Here, among notes and harmonies, people are free to let down their guard, to let themselves be moved. A young man stands, clearing his throat. He is neither handsome nor bold, but the room quiets for him all the same. He sings a love song, his voice true and untrained, a little ragged at the edges. The words tell of a lady high in a tower and a shepherd far below, of hearts that reach across impossible distances. The tale is well worn, but the way he sings it makes it new, each word landing soft as a petal. When he finishes, there's a hush, and then applause, warm and unforced. You notice the glances that dart between listeners, the smiles that linger just a little too long. The castle may be built on law and duty, but here, every exchange is a flirtation, every glance a confession. You see the lady in green slip a note to the cellist, a folded square of parchment, pressed between nimble fingers and a bashful grin. You see a scullery maid and a footman pretending to quarrel over the last candied fruit, then laughing together until they collapse onto the same cushion. Here, music is a language for what cannot be spoken in daylight. Mainstream fact, medieval courts relied on music to signal and express desires that were otherwise forbidden. Songs were often used to declare love, rivalry, or even political allegiance without ever needing to say so aloud. A matron with silver hair calls for a new song, one that tells of springtime and secret meetings in the woods. The musicians oblige, and a woman near the window, bold with the confidence of dusk, takes up the refrain, changing the lyrics with a sly twist. The room bursts into laughter at her cleverness, and the song grows, each person adding a new line or a joke, until it is a thing woven by everyone together. Part memory, part hope, part mischief. You think of all the times you've heard this song, in halls and gardens and kitchens, each version slightly changed, each performance coloured by the singer's desire. Historians still argue whether such songs preserved real stories or simply gave people a safe way to imagine lives more daring than their own. You suspect it's both. The music room is a place where longing and laughter are allowed to touch, if only for a moment. A hush falls, and someone produces a small harp. The room leans closer as a girl with clever fingers plucks out a new melody, gentle, searching, edged with longing. Her voice, soft but sure, sings of lost love and found comfort, of secrets shared beneath a summer moon. You realise that every note is a thread, binding the listeners together, if only for a night. You let your eyes wander. In a shadowed corner, a lord's son and a visiting merchant's daughter exchange shy glances, neither bold enough to speak. A matron wipes a tear, remembering her own youth, or maybe just the feeling the music stirs. The hunger here is not for food or touch, but for connection, the pleasure of being seen and heard, of knowing you are not alone in your longing. As the hour grows late, the musicians play a final tune. This one is slow and bittersweet, a lullaby for those who have nowhere to go but back to the realities of their rank and duty. You feel the ache of parting in the room, the way each person hesitates before rising, wishing the night might last a little longer. A kitchen boy lingers at the door, eyes searching the crowd for one last look, one last secret smile. The musicians pack up their instruments, laughter and warmth lingering in their wake. The room empties, but the hunger remains, a gentle ache, a memory of something beautiful and fleeting. You realise that this is the castle's truest secret. Not the feasts or the tapestries or the games in the cellar, but these small, stolen moments of shared humanity. Here, for an hour, everyone is allowed to want, to hope, to feel. You slip out into the corridor, music still humming in your bones. The castle seems softer, its edges blurred by twilight and song. You wander aimlessly, unsure whether you're searching for someone or something, or just letting the last notes of the night carry you where they will. In a quiet gallery you pause to look out the window. The garden glows with moonlight, paths silvered and soft. You spot a pair of figures walking slowly, their heads bent close in conversation. Their steps are unhurried, their movements full of gentle yearning. You imagine what words pass between them, confessions, hopes, maybe promises for another night. You wonder if all longing is just music in another form, something that echoes through the corridors of every heart. You turn back to the room behind you, now empty and echoing, and feel a twinge of loneliness. But it is not the loneliness of absence. It is the sweetness of knowing that you're not alone in wanting more. You carry the music with you, a quiet comfort against the world's sharper edges. Night falls more deeply, pressing against the windows, and you find your way to your own chamber. You lie in the dark, listening to the last faint strains of melody in your mind. You think of all the faces in the music room, each one lit by the hope of connection, the pleasure of being part of something larger than themselves. Historians may argue whether music really changed lives, or if it was simply a balm for restless hearts. But you know the truth. In that room, for a little while, you were changed. You found the courage to long, to hope, to let yourself be carried by a song. You drift to sleep with a memory of music in your veins and the knowledge that, come morning, the hunger will remain. And that, perhaps, is the castle's greatest secret. Pleasure is not always found in the forbidden, but in the honest hunger to belong, to love, to be moved by a melody sung softly in the dark. When morning comes, the castle is alive with the usual scurry of day, chambermaids sweeping, cooks bickering over dough, stable hands calling to nervous horses. You, however, are drawn to the outer bailey, a place where formality frays and a certain breed of mischief finds its wings. You're seeking someone, though you'd never admit it aloud, the falconer's apprentice, with her wild red hair and the calluses of someone who spends her hours with wings and talons, not with books or lace. You find her behind the mews, coaxing a young goshawk onto her gloved fist. The bird's eyes are fierce, unblinking, its feathers the colour of thunderclouds. She glances up at your approach, her smile crooked and wary. "Come to try your luck?" she asks, voice muffled by the feather-stuffed hood slung over one shoulder. "Or are you only here for the company?" You grin, and the apprentice tosses you a second glove worn soft at the palm. There is a kind of pleasure in the awkwardness as you fumble with the straps. Pleasure in the simple, necessary work of it, the way that handling a hawk demands both patience and courage. She teaches you the quiet language of the muse, the subtle hand signals, the whispered endearments, the careful balance between freedom and control. The air is sharp with the scent of straw and old meat, but layered beneath is the wild, clean tang of feathers and wind. The birds shift on their perches, alert and proud, each one a bundle of instinct and muscle. You realise, as you stand there with the glove heavy on your hand, that these birds are both tools and treasures, symbols of status certainly, but also messengers, confidants, sometimes even secret keepers. With a flourish, the apprentice fastens a jest to the young hawk and leads you beyond the outer wall, out into the field where the grass still glitters with dew. She sets the bird loose, and it launches into the sky, soaring, wheeling, a shadow against the morning sun. You watch in silence, awed by the raw grace of it. For a moment nothing exists except the sweep of wings and the hope that the hawk will return. She lets the silence stretch, then murmurs, "Not every bird comes back, you know. Sometimes you have to let go and trust it'll find its way home." She glances at you, eyes sharp. It's like that with secrets too. You send them out and hope the wind's on your side. Her meaning isn't lost on you. In this place, secrets fly swift and sure, passed from hand to hand as quietly as a hawk gliding over the rooftops. You've heard the rumours before that messages, wrapped in tiny scraps of parchment, sometimes travel beneath a falcon's wing. Historians still argue whether the noble courts truly use birds for more than sport and spectacle, or whether such tales are the hopeful inventions of lovers and conspirators. You, standing here with a falconer's apprentice, want to believe it's true. In a world as closely watched as this, freedom can be measured in the flight of a bird, and safety in the loyalty of those who know how to read the sky. The apprentice produces a narrow strip of vellum so thin it nearly flutters away in her hand. "Watch," she says, and quickly scrawls a message. just a handful of words. She tucks it under the hawk's leg, the knot as deft as a promise. "For the apothecary," she whispers, as if anyone might overhear. You can't resist asking what the message says. She grins, eyes full of secrets. Something sweet, something sharp. Not every message needs to be a matter of state. Sometimes it's just an invitation for wine and honey cakes. You both laugh, startled by the pleasure of being outside, alone, conspirators for a morning. The hawk returns, wings beating slow and proud, the message delivered without a single word spoken between the castle's many watching eyes. Most people, the apprentice confides, never think to look at the birds. She strokes the hawk's breast, gentle as any lover. But a hawk remembers kindness, and cruelty too. You walk together through the tall grass, letting the sun warm your backs. You talk about the falcons, how they're trained, what they eat, the legends that cluster around them. Mainstream fact: falcons were symbols of nobility, wealth and power, and falconry was a pastime so prized that, in some courts, only those of certain rank could own or fly particular breeds. Apprentices trained for years, learning to read not just the birds but the moods of the lords and ladies who watched. You share your own stories, the tapestries, the music, the cellar games, and she listens, her face a study in attention. She's younger than you thought, but her eyes are old, full of things she's seen and things she can never say. She tells you about the lonely hours in the mews, the quiet thrill of earning a bird's trust, the fear that one morning she'll find an empty perch and know she'll never see her favourite hawk again. They're wild things, she says, and no matter how careful you are, they belong to the sky. You nod, understanding more than you can say. There's a freedom here that is both exhilarating and terrifying. The castle walls are a kind of safety, but also a cage. In the mews, at least, you can pretend the world is wider. Suddenly, the apprentice tugs your arm, urging you behind a thicket. Two figures move along the edge of the field. A pair of knights, voices low and urgent, hands moving in coded gestures. You and the apprentice watch, breath held, as one of the knights glances toward the falconer's shed and then slips a folded paper into a carved crevice in the wall. The other nods, pats his shoulder, and the two part ways, one back toward the castle, the other vanishing into the woods. The apprentice's grip tightens. It's not just lovers' messages that travel with the hawks, she whispers. Sometimes it's news from the outside, or warnings, or worse. She looks at you, something like fear flickering in her eyes. If you're clever, you can know more about this place in a day than most nobles learn in a year. You file that away, a reminder that pleasure and danger are twins in a castle full of watchers. You ask if she ever reads the messages she carries. She shakes her head, lips pressed tight. Some secrets aren't worth the wait, but some you keep, just in case. The rest of the morning passes in a kind of suspended time. You help clean the mews, haul buckets of water, mend a broken perch. The work is honest, grounding. The apprentice hums as she works, a tune you half recognise from the music room the night before. You realise that every corner of this place is connected by invisible threads, stories, secrets, and the ever-present longing to be seen, to matter, to find some sliver of freedom. When the sun is high, you sit in the shade, sharing a crust of bread and a mug of cider. The apprentice shows you a battered tin box. Inside are treasures, malted feathers, a blue glass bead, a silver thimble, a twist of faded ribbon. Gifts, she explains, from people who wanted to thank me for a favour, or to buy my silence. She laughs, not unkindly. You'd be amazed what a person will pay to keep a secret. You turn the bead over in your hand, marvelling at its weight. How such a small thing could carry so much meaning. Historians still debate whether falconers and their apprentices were trusted or feared, loved or simply tolerated. The answer, you suspect, is all of the above. In a world where every word is watched, those who carry messages on wings or in whispers hold the balance of power, if only for a moment. The apprentice finishes her cider, stretches and sets the hawks to roost. "Come back any time," she says, her tone light but her gaze earnest. "The birds remember friends even if people forget." You promise you will, tucking the blue bead into your pocket. It feels like an invitation and a warning all at once. You return to the castle through the kitchen garden, your mind buzzing with all you've learned. You realise as you watch a hawk wheel high above the towers that every pleasure in this place is doubled by risk. Every secret kept is a secret that could one day be used. But still, what is life, here or anywhere, if not a series of chances taken, of trust given and sometimes lost? Back inside, you pause by a window and watch the sky. You see, for just a moment, the apprentice standing among the hawks, arm outstretched. One by one, the birds launch themselves into the wind, flying high, each bearing its own story. Some returned, some vanished, some destined never to be known by anyone at all. You smile, thinking that even in a castle built on rules and rituals, there are still those who find ways to slip past the boundaries, who trust in wings, in secrets, in the chance that, just once, something wild and true might find its way home. You leave the falconer's mews, the blue bead heavy in your pocket, and cross the bailey with a new sense of awareness. The castle is never silent. Even in the quieter corners, there's always a rustle, a whisper, a story on the edge of being told. You pass maids giggling over laundry baskets, a pair of young squires squabbling with wooden swords, a nurse scolding a boy for climbing a rain-slicked wall. Life continues above ground, in sunlight and order, but something pulls you downward, back to the places most try not to think about, where sunlight never quite reaches and pleasure and pain twist together in the shadows. It's the dungeons you're drawn to, though you're not sure why. Perhaps it's the memory of whispered tales told in the kitchens, the stories of cold cells and forbidden trysts, of prisoners who vanished and those who were set free at a price. Maybe it's curiosity, or a morbid longing to see what is hidden. Whatever the reason, you find yourself descending a steep spiral stair, the air growing damp and chill as you go. At the bottom, the passage narrows. You can hear the slow drip of water somewhere close, and the walls are slick with moss and old grime. You pass an open archway leading to a row of cells, their iron gates thrown wide in the daytime. Most are empty now. Only a stray blanket or gnawed bone hints at their recent use. But the dungeon's deepest room, a chamber carved from solid rock, holds something different. A guard sits dozing by the door, keys jangling from his belt. He startles awake as you approach, squinting. "Lost, are you?" he asks, his voice low and gruff but not unfriendly. You hesitate, uncertain, then admit you're looking for, well, you're not sure what. He grins, a little sadly, and waves you through. "You won't find gold down here," he says, "but you'll find a story or two." Inside, the cell is dim and surprisingly warm. A brazier burns in the corner, casting dancing shadows on the walls. At first, you see nothing unusual, just a straw pallet, a chipped cup, a loop of chain fixed to the stone. But then you notice the graffiti, hundreds of marks carved into the wall. Names, dates, prayers, curses, jokes. Some are fresh, some nearly worn away. A kind of living memory, scratched into the bones of the castle itself. You kneel to read a few. "For love I stayed," one inscription says, the letters jagged but bold. Another, "I am not alone." Still another, "Remember me, who sang in darkness." There is, you realise, a whole secret world preserved here, a history of longing, suffering, and surprisingly hope. You run your fingers over a carving of a bird in flight, the wings rough but sure. There's tenderness here, and the ache of wanting to be free. A memory surfaces, a story told by a handmaid about a nobleman who was imprisoned for defying his lord, how his lover sent him messages hidden in bread, and how, after his release, they carved a bird together into the dungeon wall as a promise to never let captivity steal their hope. Historians still debate whether dungeons were used only for punishment, or sometimes for protection, or even secret meetings. The truth, you sense, is a knot of all three. The cells might have witnessed cruelty, but also mercy. Punishments handed out for theft or defiance, but also quiet kindnesses. The extra blanket, the smuggled treat, the guard who looked the other way. In one shadowed corner you find a battered bench and sit. The air down here is thick, close, but not suffocating. You listen. For a long time there's only silence, punctuated by the occasional scrape of a rat or the flutter of a moth. Then you hear it, a quiet humming, soft as breath. It takes you a moment to realise the tune is familiar, the same lullaby sung in the music room, now echoing in this unlikely place. You stand, searching for the source. The sound grows louder, leading you to a far cell, its door left slightly ajar. Inside, huddled on the straw, is a figure. A girl, maybe a little younger than you, her hair wild, her face smudged with dirt but her eyes steady and bright. She glances up, startled, but does not flinch. Instead, she keeps humming, her voice rising and falling with the patience of someone who has learned to wait. You ask her name, and after a moment's hesitation she tells you. She was caught sneaking bread for a starving brother, she says, and the steward put her down here to teach her a lesson. But she shrugs, not bitter. It's not so bad, she says. Better to be punished for kindness than for cruelty. She pats the empty space beside her, and you sit, careful not to crowd her. The two of you talk quietly at first, then with growing ease. She tells you about her family, her brothers, all younger, the work they do, the trouble they cause. She speaks of her mother, who taught her every prayer she knows, and her father, who died when she was small. You share your own stories, some true, some embellished, and together you weave a tapestry of memory and hope, each thread brighter than the cold stone around you. At one point she pulls from her sleeve a tiny scrap of cloth embroidered with the image of a kitten. For luck, she says, pressing it into your palm. My mother made it, but I think it's done all the good it can for me. Maybe it will bring you better fortune. You hold the kitten close, touched by the gift and the trust it represents. You promise to keep it safe, and she smiles wide and unguarded. Don't worry about me, she says. I'll be out soon enough. They always forget about us, but we never forget each other. Time slips by, measured only by the dying coals in the brazier. The girl dozes, her head on your shoulder. The silence down here feels different now, less like a punishment, more like a promise. You wonder how many moments of kindness have bloomed in these cells, how many secret friendships have grown in the cracks of hardship. The guard returns, his footsteps echoing on the flagstones. He peers in, then nods, satisfied. Time's up, he says, not unkindly. Come back if you like. There's always company in the dark. As you leave, the girl waves, her smile undimmed by the gloom. Back in the corridor, you pause to read more graffiti. One carving, newer than the rest, catches your eye. Two hands clasped, carved with such care you can almost feel their warmth. Underneath, a single word. Mercy. You trace the lines, thinking how, even in the deepest shadows, people find ways to reach for each other. On your way back up the stairs, you pass the kitchens where the night's bread is rising. The smell is sweet, a reminder that life goes on, even for those in the deepest cell. You tuck the embroidered kitten into your sleeve, a small shield against whatever the day may bring. Later, you return to the upper halls, the world above bright and busy. But you carry the hush of the dungeons with you, the memory of the girl's voice, the softness of her gift. You find yourself looking differently at the people you pass, their burdens, their small acts of courage and kindness. In a place built for order and discipline, it is these quiet rebellions that keep hope alive. You realize as you drift off to sleep that night that the dungeons are not just places of pain, but of possibility, where even the harshest stones can be softened by a song, a story, or the touch of a friend's hand. Here too forbidden pleasures bloom, the pleasure of comfort, of mercy, of solidarity and darkness. The castle wakes slowly after rain, each stone dripping, the air perfumed with damp earth and the musk of fallen leaves. Through the open windows drift the sounds of a world returning to itself. Children squabbling in the bailey, the thud of boots on flagstones, the bright scold of a bird outside the kitchens. The memories of cellars and dungeons cling to you as you wander, softer now, blurred by the gentler light of a grey morning. You find yourself drawn to the Queen's Cellar, a place that glows even on the dullest days. The Queen is said to spend her hours here, behind latticed windows and walls painted with scenes of distant lands, surrounded by a hush as dense as velvet. The rumour in the hallways is that her pleasures are small and ordinary. Spools of silk thread, foreign books, the slow tending of potted roses and sweet basil. But the Cellar's privacy suggests more, a power carefully shielded, a space that belongs to her alone. You hesitate at the threshold, unsure whether to enter. The guard outside says nothing, only nods, and so you step through the doorway, closing it gently behind you. Inside, the world is transformed. Sunlight seeps through the painted glass, colouring the walls in patterns of gold and blue. The air is thick with the scents of beeswax, lavender, and something sharper, ink perhaps, or the faint tang of lemon balm. A fire smoulders in the hearth, adding its own note of comfort. The Queen sits by the window, a spindle in her lap, her hands moving with practised ease as she spins golden thread from a pile of raw silk. She glances up, her eyes quick and calm. "Come in," she says, voice low and musical. "You're not interrupting, I was only thinking." Her tone is neither royal nor familiar, simply honest, as if you've been friends for years. You sit, folding your hands in your lap, and wait. She spins in silence for a moment longer, the wheel humming softly. "There's pleasure in quiet work," she says at last. "It reminds me that power can be gentle, that not everything worth having must be won in the open or shouted for." She offers you a small smile, as if to say that she understands what you've been seeking through the castle's hidden corners. You ask about her spinning and she laughs, a soft surprise sound. They say queens should keep their hands soft, but I think best when my hands are busy. She threads another length of silk and spins on, her gaze distant. "This wheel belonged to my grandmother. She used it to make thread for her daughter's wedding gowns. She always said that happiness comes from what you build with your own hands, not what's handed to you." She pauses, and you sense she's letting you into a secret. "In here, I am allowed to choose my pleasures. I grow my own rosemary, I read what I wish, I can sit silent for an hour and not answer to anyone." She leans forward, her voice dropping, "And when the courtiers ask what I do all day, I say, I wait, I listen, I remember." She winks, a hint of mischief threading through her dignity. You ask if she ever grows restless. She nods. "Oh, of course. Sometimes I want to run wild in the fields, or ride with no one watching, or sing songs too bawdy for a queen." She grins, conspiratorial. "Sometimes I do. But the greatest pleasure is knowing that just for a little while I can be ordinary, that I can belong to myself." She gestures to a table stacked with books, some in Latin, some in her own flowing hand. She invites you to pick one. You run your fingers along the spines, choosing a slim volume bound in pale leather. The words inside are poetry, written in a hand unfamiliar to you, but the verses sing of longing, laughter, and the joy of small things: a bowl of cherries, a summer rain, the memory of a friend's voice in the dark. The Queen leans over your shoulder, reading along. "I found that in a market in Florence," she says. "It cost me more than it should have. But the merchant said it was written by a woman who taught herself to write, and I wanted to believe it." She sighs, her voice threaded with wonder. Words are another kind of pleasure, aren't they? A way of reaching out when no one is listening. You talk together for a while, sharing favourite lines and stories. She tells you about the letters she receives from queens and countesses across the sea, coded messages, hidden in descriptions of dresses and banquets. "We're all alone in a way," she says. "Even surrounded by people, we keep parts of ourselves in secret. That's what makes these moments matter. What is pleasure, if not the freedom to be fully ourselves just for a little while? A servant brings in tea, steaming, fragrant with lemon and mint. You sip in silence, comforted by the ritual. The queen watches the play of sunlight on the table, her face serene. Historians still argue, she muses, whether queens had real power or only the illusion of it. I think they're asking the wrong question. The real question is how we find power in the places no one thinks to look. You see her glance toward the corner where a casket rests, polished wood, inlaid with silver. She opens it, revealing a handful of objects: a painted fan, a carved comb, a scrap of music written in her own hand. She lifts the fan and studies it, as if recalling another world. Gifts, she explains, from friends, from rivals, sometimes from people I hardly knew. Each one has a story, a risk, a promise, a memory. She sets the fan aside and picks up the comb, running it through her hair with a sigh. Sometimes I wonder what I'll leave behind when I'm gone. Will anyone remember the things I loved, the books I read, the gardens I tended, the laughter I shared with my handmaids? Or will they only remember the crown and the sceptre and the weight of duty? You see a sadness flicker across her face, quickly masked by a practiced smile. But that's another pleasure, to imagine your own legacy, to shape it, quietly, in ways no one else can see. The morning slips by in a gentle rhythm of talk and quiet work. You help her untangle a skein of silk, winding it onto a spool as she hums an old song under her breath. She tells you of the gardens she plans for spring, of letters half-written and left unsent, of a painting she commissioned from an artist who paints only in the hour before dawn. You realise listening that the Queen's pleasures are as layered and complex as any midnight game or secret tryst. They are woven through her days: the scent of rosemary, the weight of a well-made comb, the satisfaction of spinning thread, the private joy of reading forbidden lines by candlelight. Here, in her Cellar, power and pleasure are not at odds. They are one and the same, quiet and profound. As noon approaches, she lays aside her work and stands. She invites you to the window, where you look out together at the rain-silvered rooftops and the courtyard below. "This is my kingdom," she says softly. "Not the lands on a map, but the world I build for myself each day. The things I choose, the people I trust, the stories I keep alive." You feel honoured to have seen this hidden world, to have shared in the Queen's forbidden pleasures, the pleasures of quiet, of work, of ownership over her own mind and hours. You thank her, and she presses a spool of silk into your hand. "Take it," she says, a reminder that even in a place built on duty, there is room for joy, and that sometimes the things we make for ourselves matter most of all. You leave the Cellar changed, the silk warm in your palm, the memory of the Queen's words lighting the way. You understand now that pleasure in the castle is not always loud or dangerous. Sometimes it is spun from patience, from beauty, from small acts of defiance, from the right to shape your own day. It is hidden not behind locked doors, but in the softness of sunlight on a quiet morning, the weight of a book, the turn of a spindle in a Queen's steady hands. You descend from the Queen's Cellar with her spool of silk in your palm, the threads light and strong, holding together more than mere fabric, binding memory, hope, and the kind of quiet rebellion that only grows in the shadows. The castle, meanwhile, hums on, kitchens steaming with midday broth, bells chiming the hour, messengers darting up and down the stairs. The court's surface glimmers with routine and rule, but you now know how many hidden rivers run beneath. You let your steps wander, following no particular plan, until you find yourself near the castle's ancient library. The great doors stand open, just as they do each day, but there is a hush inside that feels different, deeper, more intent. The air is thick with the perfume of old parchment and lamp oil, layered with whispers and the soft scuffle of slippers on stone. You slip inside. Here, the shelves tower high and dark, crowded with volumes whose secrets outnumber even those of the living. It is a place for learning, for memory, and, if you're careful, a place for dangerous pleasures too. You recall with a sly smile your first furtive visit to the hidden book room all those nights ago, the poems scribbled in the psalter, the way every story and every secret seemed to beckon from between the leaves. A slender woman in a scholar's robe sits at a table near the window, her hair escaping in wild curls. She looks up and grins when she sees you. "Looking for something forbidden?" she whispers, only half joking. You shrug, and she waves you over, patting the seat beside her. "I've just received a letter," she confides, "from a friend in Paris. She says the king there has banned 3 new books, so of course, I sent for copies." She gestures to a stack of slim volumes, each wrapped in oilcloth. "Want to see?" She opens one to a page illuminated with blue and gold, a miniature painting of lovers in a moonlit orchard. The text is French, but the meaning needs no translation. The words pulse with longing and wit, with the sly humour that lives in every act of disobedience. "This one," the scholar says, "was written by a woman, though the king's censors will never admit it. Sometimes I think the whole world is held together by the stories women write in secret." You ask how she gets her books. She laughs, a low, delighted sound. "There's always a way if you want something badly enough. A merchant from Venice, a monk with a fondness for riddles, a seamstress who hides letters in her hems. The harder something is to find, the sweeter the pleasure of reading it." You turn the pages together, marvelling at the worlds revealed in ink and colour. The scholar points out clever jokes hidden in the margins. Tiny animals, scandalous initials, even a recipe for a love potion hidden in a footnote. "If you ever want to send a message that no one else will find," she says, "try writing it upside down, or in the language of flowers, or in the lines of a song." She shows you a volume where, in the illuminated border, a careful sequence of lilies and violets spells out a name. You settle into the day's rhythm, letting the scholar teach you. She reads you lines of poetry in Latin and Provençal, translating as she goes, her voice low and musical. She tells you of the way books travel, passed hand to hand, traded for silks or spices, sometimes hidden in pies or sewn into saddlebags. Historians still argue whether books change the course of kingdoms, or just the course of one person's heart, she muses. "I think they do both, or neither, but either way it's the reading that matters." Mainstream fact. In many castles, women of the court were secretly as well read as their brothers or husbands. They kept private collections, copied books by hand, and sometimes smuggled banned texts across borders, disguising them in embroidery or beneath false covers. You watch as others slip into the library, each seeking something different. A steward's daughter scans a cookbook for a new spice. A page boy peers at a battered volume of tales, eyes wide with longing. A lady in mourning takes out a letter, reads it again and again, her thumb worrying at the seal. The library is not just a storehouse of knowledge. It is a harbour for all the secret wants that cannot be voiced elsewhere. The scholar offers you a pen and a scrap of fine parchment. "Write something," she encourages. "A line you want to remember, a secret you can't say aloud. Here, every word is safe." You hesitate, then write, "Not every pleasure need be seen." You set the parchment aside and she smiles as if she's just heard a particularly good joke. In the corner, an old man nods off over a book of saints' lives. His head dips, then jerks upright, and you hear him mutter, "Even saints must have had secrets." You and the scholar stifle laughter. She leans close. "Sometimes I wonder if the greatest saints and sinners were just those brave enough to want something they couldn't have." You spend hours like this, reading, writing, trading stories. You discover a hidden drawer in the table stuffed with tiny notes, confessions, hopes, lines of poetry, drawings of cats, pressed flowers, and, strangest of all, a tiny carved wooden acorn, smooth from years of passing between hands. The scholar tells you that when someone is brave enough to put their own secret in the drawer, they're allowed to take someone else's. You consider the phrase you wrote, then slip your parchment in, taking instead a pressed violet, and a note that reads, "Trust the kitchen girl with red ribbons. She knows every door that opens and every one that stays locked." The afternoon slips away. Sunlight moves across the shelves. dust motes swirling in golden clouds. You realise, as you help the scholar stack books and tidy scrolls, that the library is as much a meeting place as the garden or cellar, a crossroads for those who hunger for something more. Here you see the castle not as a fortress, but as a living mind, full of yearning, risk, and the joy of discovery. You part from the scholar at the door, promising to bring her something new next time. An odd word, a riddle, a story that's only half true. She waves you off, already lost in another book. As you leave, you notice a boy tucking a slim volume into his belt, the look of secret pleasure on his face unmistakable. Outside, the castle is caught in the golden hush before supper. You spot the kitchen girl with red ribbons, and she grins as if she already knows what note you've read. She beckons you to a side passage, slipping you a warm roll, a wink, and a whispered warning about a visiting lord's sharp eyes. You eat the bread in the quiet courtyard, savouring the sweetness, the sense of being in on the joke. You think of all the secret joys that wind through the stone and shadow, a queen's poem, a scholar's laughter, a kitchen girl's warning. In a world that prizes discipline and duty, the courage to seek pleasure, even if only in a book, a flower, a moment of mischief, is perhaps the most subversive act of all. As the sun dips low, you return to your own chamber, silk and pressed violet and secret note tucked safe in your sleeve. You think of all you have learned, not just the rules and rituals of the court, but the language of longing and delight that runs beneath. You know now that forbidden pleasure is not always what the rules forbid. Sometimes it is what you allow yourself in the quietest, bravest corners of your day. And as you drift towards sleep, the library's hush and the queen's kindness and the kitchen girl's knowing glance all weave together in your dreams a tapestry of secrets, laughter, and hope, each thread bright as silk in the morning light. There are nights when the castle feels impossibly vast, its corridors multiplying with every turn, the very stones humming with secrets. This night, as you make your slow, unhurried way back to your chamber, you feel those hidden stories pressing close, as if every wall, every tapestry, every cool flagstone underfoot holds its own memory of pleasure, longing, and rebellion. You pause at the stairwell, listening to the silence, a silence that is never quite whole, always woven with distant echoes, laughter in a far room, the scrape of a lute string, the hush of a whispered promise. Your feet lead you one last time to the rooftop walk, the castle's highest parapet, where the whole kingdom lies hushed and silvered in moonlight. The air is crisp and sweet, and you draw your cloak tighter as you step out into the wind. From up here, the castle is both fortress and refuge, each window glowing softly, each courtyard shadowed with the stories of the day. The sky's cloudless, a deep, endless blue, crowded with stars. You're not alone. A handful of others are scattered along the battlements, two boys trading riddles, a serving woman gazing at the stars, a young couple lost in quiet conversation. You choose a quiet stretch of wall and lean out over the valley, feeling the sharp joy of solitude without loneliness. This place, this hour, feels like the truest secret of all, the joy of belonging to something vast and beautiful, yet having a corner of it entirely to yourself. You take out the spool of silk from the queen, the violet from the library, the blue bead from the falconer's apprentice, and the embroidered kitten from the dungeon girl. These little treasures sit in your palm, a gathering of secret tokens, each one a testament to the hidden pleasures you've uncovered behind the castle's gates. Each one is a fragment of friendship, of risk, of hope. You marvel at the variety, a symbol of power spun patiently in solitude, a fragile flower pressed in longing, a bead given in quiet complicity, a patch stitched with kindness even in darkness. Turning the violet over in your fingers, you remember the library's scholar and her laughter, the code in the flowers, the endless debate about whether stories or facts matter more. You recall the scholar's assurance that every book, every story, every secret, no matter how small, leaves its mark shaping the heart and the mind of whoever dares to claim it. "Let the world think what it will," she had said. "Pleasure is the ink with which we write our own truth." A warm breeze ripples over the parapet, carrying the scent of distant orchards and wood smoke. Below, the fields are dark and silent, the world reduced to silhouettes and shifting silver. You watch a hawk, one of the falconer's brood perhaps, glide across the moon, its wings cutting the light in two. It seems a good omen, or perhaps a message, for those who know how to look for meaning in flight. The young couple near you stands and begins to dance, quietly, as if rehearsing for some future feast. They twirl beneath the stars, their shadows long and graceful, and their laughter rises like music. You smile, remembering the music room, the songs that spoke what no voice dared say in daylight. You remember the hunger that hummed in the walls, for love, for freedom, for the chance to choose one's own happiness. You wonder if this small rebellion, this private joy, is what truly marks the boundaries of the forbidden. Historians still argue whether the pleasures of castle life were merely escapism, or if, in their own subtle ways, they sowed the seeds of real change. They question if whispered confessions and secret meetings ever toppled a tyrant, or if all these small rebellions simply made the larger world bearable. You find yourself thinking, not for the first time, that both can be true. That a loaf of bread smuggled to a hungry friend, or a message carried on a hawk's wing, is a kind of revolution. One that may never make it into the chronicles, but which matters fiercely to the people who lived it. You slip your hand into your pocket, feeling for the ribbon from the Handmaids, and tie it around the spool of silk. These treasures, you realize, are not just mementos. They are a promise to yourself, to remember the softness beneath the rules, the connections made in laughter and risk and trust. You turn back to the parapet, letting the night wind carry your thoughts across the darkened fields. A serving woman comes near, wraps a shawl tighter around her shoulders and asks, "What do you see out there?" You answer honestly, "Everything I hoped to find, and more than I knew I wanted." She smiles, her face lined but warm, and leans on the wall beside you. "The world's wider than any castle," she says, "but it's here we learn what matters most." You nod, understanding, knowing that these walls have held you, shaped you, protected and challenged you, but that you are free to carry their lessons wherever you choose. As the hours pass, more join you on the rooftop. Some bring mugs of spiced wine, others share jokes or memories. One boy reads aloud from a borrowed book, his voice trembling at first, then growing stronger as the others listen. It is a story about a lost princess, a cunning baker, and a key hidden beneath a loaf of rye. The plot is outlandish, but the pleasure is real. The joy of words shared, of community formed in the simplest way, by giving and receiving a story. A hush falls as the moon rises higher. Someone begins to hum the lullaby from the dungeon, and one by one others join in. The melody winds around you like a blanket, soft and old, woven of memory and longing. You close your eyes, letting the music seep into your bones. There are no more masks here, no more ranks or rules, just people gathered in the cool embrace of the night, sharing in the oldest pleasure of all, to belong. You think of the castle now not just as a place of stone and ceremony, but as a living thing, a vast breathing body made of small moments and secret joys. You remember the garden laughter, the bathhouse gossip, the candlelit masquerades, the songs and books and ribbons and forbidden rides at dawn. You see that each forbidden pleasure behind these gates has not simply been an escape from duty, but a celebration of possibility, a small act of faith in the beauty and worth of life itself. The sky begins to pale at the edges, hinting at morning. The company on the roof grows quiet, some drifting away to catch an hour's sleep, others lost in their own thoughts. You remain, unwilling to leave the world you have found, to let go of the hush and the warmth and the certainty that, for a few precious hours, the castle has belonged to those who dared to find joy within its walls. You gather your treasures, tuck them safely away, and stand at last. As you descend the winding stairs, You look back once, just to be sure the moon is still watching, the hawk still circling, the voices still singing in the wind, and you promise yourself, quietly, fiercely, to carry this night and all its hidden pleasures wherever you go. Let the world slow now. The castle settles into silence, the last laughter echoing softly along the walls. Candles gutter out, shadows stretch and mingle, and all the stories, whispered, sung, woven in silk or carved in stone, grow gentle in the hush before dawn. You feel the weight of the day slip from your shoulders, replaced by something lighter, the memory of kindness, the warmth of secrets shared, the quiet courage it takes to find pleasure in unexpected places. Let your breath grow deep and slow, your thoughts as soft as the garden air after rain. All around you, the stones themselves seem to breathe, old and wise, sheltering dreams and daring alike. Whatever burdens you brought to this night, let them rest for now. The castle, with all its forbidden joys, has shown you that even the heaviest gates can open, that every shadow can hold a blessing, and that the world is full of gentle rebellion if you look closely enough. Remember the laughter of the bathhouse, the hush of the library, the flight of the hawk, each a promise that comfort, delight and connection are never truly out of reach. Let yourself drift, safe within these walls, lulled by the last notes of song and the slow heartbeat of a place where pleasure is both a secret and a birthright. When you wake, you will carry these memories with you, a shield against the world's coldness, a reminder that the smallest happiness can bloom even behind the thickest stone. So rest easy now, the castle keeps its quiet watch. You are not alone. Sweet dreams.